Hey guys, tonight we're rolling back the clock exactly 100 years. Yeah, one whole century to the year 1925. Welcome to America when jazz ruled the airwaves, cars were still kinda experimental, and your phone was probably nailed to a wall assuming you even had one. And if you're thinking, cool, I'd thrive in the Roaring Twenties and I've got news, you probably wouldn't survive this. Between the coal smoke, the questionable food safety, and the fact that antibiotics weren't really a thing yet. Yeah, good luck. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead, I'll wait. Okay, nice. Also, drop your city and the time you're watching this in the comments. Are you winding down or pulling an all-nighter? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a strange room, unfamiliar yet oddly charming. Lace curtains flutter against a breeze from the open window, and the smell, wood smoke, soap, and something baking fills your nose. There's a hard bed under your back, scratchy wool blankets tucked tightly. You sit up groggy and glance around. Floral wallpaper. A pitcher and basin instead of a sink. A rotary phone on the wall, silent and heavy like it knows things. Welcome to 1925. Outside your window, the street bustles with life, though not a single car alarm blares and no one is staring at a screen. The sounds are organic. Wooden wheels on cobblestones, a newspaper boy hollering headlines, somewhere a dog barks like it's got a mortgage to worry about. You take it all in with the disbelief of a time traveller, or a TikTok addict cut off from Wi-Fi. You step into the hallway. The floorboards creak. Downstairs, a radio hums out a tinny jazz melody. Louis Armstrong, maybe? It's warm, scratchy, and somehow perfect. Radios are the hot gadget right now, and if you're lucky, the family you're staying with splurged on one. In 1925, that meant a massive wooden box that weighed more than your microwave and pulled sound from invisible waves in the air. Magic, basically. In the kitchen, a woman in an apron is cracking eggs into a frying pan. She's wearing a house dress, low heels, and a perfectly set bob cut. She's been up since 5, probably. This is her realm. Behind her, a man adjusts his suspenders in the mirror, grumbling about the latest rail strike. That's probably your dad in this simulation. He's clean-shaven, smells faintly of tobacco and Brill cream, and has a paper tucked under his arm. It's the Saturday Evening Post with a Norman Rockwell cover that somehow captures the very soul of the era. He doesn't look up. It's a man's world, and morning is for muttering into your coffee. Stepping outside, the sunlight hits you. Bright, but filtered through coal smoke and factory haze. The cars, if you can call them that, clunk and rattle down the street, coughing up exhaust that smells like a chemistry experiment gone wrong. Most people still walk or take the streetcar, loud and janky little thing that screeches around corners like it's being chased. You walk past a row of brick houses, each one different, yet somehow uniform. Kids in knickers kick a ball in the street. A woman hangs laundry from a line stretched between windows, expertly avoiding the pigeons. A milkman waves as he clinks glass bottles onto porches. It's charming and exhausting. Everything takes effort here. Water's not always hot. The post office is crucial. Iceboxes are literal boxes of ice. You want a snack? You churn butter or find a candy store and hope they take your coins. You reach the town square, a hub of motion and gossip. There's a barber shop with a red and white pole spinning lazily, a soda fountain promising relief from the heat, and a general store where the smell of leather, licorice and oil soap hits you like a punch of nostalgia you didn't know you had. People chat on benches, read aloud from the paper, or gather under awnings to complain about taxes. That part hasn't changed. As you stand there, a man rides by on a bicycle. His hat nearly flies off. He's humming the latest hit, maybe Sweet Georgia Brown, which is echoing across America thanks to radio networks finally stretching coast to coast. In fact, 1925 is when UGN in Chicago first broadcasted coast to coast using phone lines, a huge deal. Suddenly America feels smaller. You're all dancing to the same tune. But it's not all jazz and milkshakes. If you're not white male and middle class, this era is a whole different experience. Women just got the vote 5 years ago, and not everyone's thrilled about it. Black Americans face brutal segregation, especially in the South, and indigenous peoples are still being herded into boarding schools and stripped of their languages. The booming economy, not exactly equal opportunity, still there's a buzz in the air, like the whole country is breathing in possibility. Skyscrapers are rising. The Model T is democratizing travel. Flappers are shortening their skirts and challenging every rule in the book. You hear two older ladies whisper about a neighbour's daughter who's gone modern, which apparently means bobbed hair, jazz records, and not waiting around to get married. Scandalous. Before the sun sets, you catch sight of a headline in a newsstand window. Scopes Trial Shocks Nation, Science versus Scripture. That's right, it's 1925, and America is literally debating whether it's legal to teach evolution in public schools. It's Tennessee versus Darwin, and the country is divided over whether we're descended from apes or just poorly behaved humans. Scholars still argue about how much that trial really shifted public thinking. It's a cultural flashpoint with more drama than science. And as the sky deepens to a dusky lavender, and street lamps flicker to life one by one, you begin to feel the strange weight of time pressing in. You're here, in a world both impossibly foreign and deeply familiar. No smartphones, no Wi-Fi, no microwaves. But the bones of modern life are quietly assembling beneath your feet. You're standing in a hinge moment, a chapter just before the world goes truly electric. You head down the block, the pavement warming beneath your shoes as the day picks up speed. It's late morning in 1925, and the pulse of a small American town is at full tilt. This isn't the sleepy suburbia of the 1950s. There's real grit here. Main Street hums with energy, clattering shoes on sidewalks, the occasional shout from a storefront, and the constant background chatter of lives in motion. Everything's a little dusty, a little louder than you expect, but full of a kind of slow, earnest life. The buildings tower, well, okay, tower might be generous. They loom at a modest 3 or 4 stories, topped with cornices and windows that swing open from the inside. Signs hang on wrought iron brackets, some hand-painted, others advertising Coca-Cola, Lucky Strikes, or the local hardware store. Awnings flap gently in the breeze. The air smells like freshly baked bread, oil from passing cars, and a bit of horse manure, because yes, horses are still part of the picture. Not everyone's made the jump to internal combustion just yet. You pass a barber shop where a man with a neatly parted moustache sits in the window reading yesterday's paper. His reflection blinks up at you like it knows you don't belong. Next door, a group of young men in vests and rolled-up sleeves lean against the wall, joking and passing a bottle wrapped in paper. It's probably bootlegged whiskey. The 18th Amendment is still in full swing, Prohibition, so alcohol is technically illegal, but let's just say enforcement is casual. The rhythm of the street is dictated by feet and wheels. Streetcars rumble by on steel tracks, bell clanging to scatter pedestrians who aren't watching. These trolleys are lifelines, pulling passengers from neighbourhood to downtown and back again, no ride share required. Cars rattle through as well, mostly Fords, their engines popping and chugging, tyres throwing dust from brick roads. The most popular vehicle by far, the Model T, also known as the Tin Lizzie. Henry Ford's masterstroke of mass production. It's made car ownership possible for the middle class. For the first time, travel is a thing ordinary people can do just for fun. Across the street, a woman in a cloche hat and a short drop-waist dress walks arm in arm with her friend, their heels click like Morse code. These are flappers, not in the wild dancing, gin-soaked party sense yet, but in the everyday confidence sense. They're not accompanied by men, they're wearing lipstick. It's a cultural earthquake in real time. Some older folks shoot them side-eyes as they pass, muttering under their breath. But the younger girls down the block? They're watching wide-eyed. You're watching too, pretending not to. At the corner is the heart of it all, the soda fountain. It's not just a place to get a phosphate or a scoop of vanilla bean, it's the social nerve centre. Teenagers crowd into wire-backed stools, sipping on milkshakes and gossiping. A high school boy with slick-back hair and a loud laugh is holding court, making the girls giggle. You step inside and the sudden chill of the tiled floor and the scent of sugar hit you like a freight train. Behind the counter, a soda jerk in a white paper hat stacks glassware with one hand, while mixing root beer floats with the other. You order something safe, maybe a chocolate malt, and take it to a booth. The people around you are immersed in lives you'll never know. One booth holds 2 women bent over fabric swatches, possibly planning a wedding. Another has an old man chain-smoking and circling job ads in the paper. Nobody's scrolling, nobody's filming, they're just existing. The pace is different here. You realise how noisy your usual life is. With its endless alerts and loops, this world hums at a slower, steadier beat. Stepping back onto the sidewalk, you make your way past a shoe store, a jewellery shop, and the local five and dime. Inside the latter, rows of shelves overflow with goods you forgot existed. Buttons, licorice ropes, hairpins and penny toys. The place smells of pine cleaner and wax paper. At the counter, a cash register the size of a fire hydrant dings with each purchase, while a bored girl with a tight bun tallies receipts by hand. No UPC codes, no scanners, just pure analogue living. Over at the town square, a preacher is on a wooden crate shouting about damnation and redemption. A few people gather to listen, others roll their eyes and move on. Public speech is a kind of entertainment here. Free, unfiltered and bold, and absolutely everywhere. Whether it's a union organiser, a religious revivalist, or just a guy with a harmonica and something to say, Main Street is where words matter. The First Amendment is alive and kicking even if its reach is limited by your skin colour, gender, or social standing. And here's the twist. This isn't just a quaint little town. This scene is being repeated across thousands of main streets in America. 1925 is when small towns still define the country. Urbanisation is happening, sure, but the idea of downtown still means something. People gather here, not in malls or on apps. They meet, flirt, argue, amicable plans, fall in love, break up, all within earshot of the barber and the butcher. You start to notice something quirky. Almost everyone is wearing a hat. Seriously, straw boaters, cloches, bowlers, fedoras, you name it. It's perched on someone's head. And it's not just fashion. Hats are practically social armour in 1925. A man walking hatless down Main Street would get stared at like he forgot his pants. At the far end of the street, a sign catches your eye. Electric Theatre, talkies coming soon. It's the local cinema, though for now, it's still showing silent films. The marquee lists The Gold Rush starring Charlie Chaplin, one of the biggest stars of the time. It's all black and white celluloid, but people queue up like it's the Super Bowl. Inside, a live pianist plays along with the film, matching every pratfall and heartbreak with just the right note. That kind of attention? Lost in our era of autoplay. As the day stretches towards early afternoon, you pause at the edge of the street, watching it all unfold. This place is slow and unpolished, but deeply alive. There's no filter, no curated aesthetic, just raw, layered humanity. People here aren't trying to be vintage, they just are. And somehow the town breathes with a stubborn kind of optimism. Like everyone's betting on tomorrow, even if they can't see past the next trolley stop. Some scholars argue that this period between the world wars was a golden illusion, a false calm before the storm of the Great Depression. Others see it as a true pivot point, a moment when modern America finally emerged from its Victorian shadows. Whichever version you believe, Main Street in 1925 doesn't care. It just keeps going, one hat, one malt, one streetcar at a time. You leave the hum of Main Street behind, turning down a quieter road lined with modest homes, each one distinct but familiar. Clapboard siding, screened-in porches, a rocking chair or two waiting for someone's granddad to settle in with a newspaper. American flags hang faded from front stoops. There's a softness to the neighbourhood, like time here flows just a little slower. The sky's a bit hazy from distant smokestacks, and the sunlight filters through like warm syrup. You walk up to one of the houses, a 2-story craftsman with a deep front porch, and step inside. The door creaks open. Instantly, you're wrapped in a blend of scents, beeswax polish, boiled coffee, and the faint tang of mothballs. The floor's hardwood, scuffed but shining. Every piece of furniture looks heavy enough to anchor a ship. There are doilies on nearly every surface. This is the American home in 1925, and it's not playing around. The parlour is the first room you see, and is not called a living room yet, that name's still catching on. Parlour is where company sits, where you show off your best stuff, where the radio lives, if you're lucky enough to have one. A heavy cabinet set against the wall holds the family's treasured Victrola, ready to spin shellac records of Enrico Caruso or Al Jolson at a crank's notice. Beside it, a stack of hymnals and maybe a few racy jazz numbers hidden beneath a tea towel. This is still a country in transition, half prim, half party. The wallpaper in here is floral and a little dizzying, like someone let a garden loose indoors. A photograph of President Calvin Coolidge hangs in an oval frame near the mantel. It's one of those rooms that looks formal even when empty, like it's waiting for a respectable visitor to come sit and sip something politely. You wander through the house. The kitchen is alive with purpose. Cast iron pans hang from hooks, and a chipped enamel sink squats beneath a small window. A hulking icebox, not a refrigerator, occupies the corner. Inside, a literal block of ice sits on a metal shelf, slowly melting. Every few days the Iceman delivers a new one, tongs clinking as he drops it in place. Food is stored carefully, seasonally. Nothing is wasted. There are no microwaves, no pre-cut anything. Dinner takes time, and leftovers are more art than accident. In the pantry, glass jars line the shelves. Preserved peaches, green beans, pickled beets, all sealed with paraffin wax. These aren't quirky retro hobbies. They're how families eat when the seasons shift and grocery stores are still evolving. Canning isn't Instagrammable here. It's just survival with a side of vinegar. Now the dining room, a centre of ritual. You notice the long, narrow table, protected by a lace runner. The chairs are stiff-backed, arranged just so. Meals are serious business, especially dinner, which is often the only time a family gathers in one place without work or chores tugging them elsewhere. There's likely a roast involved, maybe potatoes, and always a pitcher of something, milk or water, or maybe cold tea if someone remembered to make it that morning. Meals are gendered events. The mother cooks, the father carves, and the children speak only when spoken to. Or they don't speak at all. There's a strictness in the air, softened only slightly by candlelight and the clink of forks on china. You can't help but notice formality is the language of love here, even if it doesn't always feel that way. Upstairs, bedrooms are small but tidy. Closets aren't walk-in, they're just barely step-in. People own fewer clothes, but they care for each item like it's a pet. Everything's ironed, everything smells faintly of starch and soap. The beds are stiff, often with wire springs and mattresses that feel more like gym mats. There are no TVs, obviously. Most rooms have a small table for reading, a kerosene lamp, even in homes with electricity, which still isn't universal, and maybe a worn copy of a Sears Roebuck catalogue, a source of dreams, furniture, and the occasional bathtub. The bathroom is, how do we put this gently, basic. If the house even has indoor plumbing, it's a luxury. Many families still use outhouses or chamber pots. Toilet paper, yep, it's around, but don't expect it to be soft. Baths happen once or twice a week, usually in a clawfoot tub, and the water's heated on the stove first. Hygiene is important, but the standards are still evolving. Soap is harsh, shampoo is basically a bar, and deodorant is optional. You take a moment to appreciate the fact that you were born in the age of hot showers and moisturiser. Back downstairs, you find the family gathered in the parlour again. The radio's on, broadcasting one of the first serialised radio dramas. It crackles and pops with static, but the voices still come through clear. Characters you follow week after week, your imagination doing the special effects. In Nut 25, this is the height of in-home entertainment. Families sit silently, facing the radio like it's a fireplace, eyes closed, hanging on every word. This kind of togetherness feels foreign. There are no texts, no multitasking, no earbuds splitting attention three ways. You either listen together or not at all. It's intimate in a way you haven't felt in years. A shared stillness, broken only by laughter or gasps when the hero gets too close to danger. But even in this seemingly cosy setup, cracks show. The American home in 1925 is also a place of strict roles and rigid expectations. Fathers work, mothers manage the home, children are obedient or they're punished. Spare the rod, that's not really a saying yet. It's more like an instruction manual. Discipline is swift and often physical. Love is real but rarely spoken aloud. You earn it through labour, not language. Still, there's something compelling about it all. The tactile quality of life, the way every object has weight and history. The clock ticks loudly in the corner, measuring out a life not yet devoured by digital speed. You find yourself leaning into the stillness, even as you notice how exhausting it would be to live this way full time. One quirky note: many homes still rely on gas lighting, or a mix of gas and early electricity. Sometimes the wall plates are confusing with half switches and half valves. The risk of explosion, present but ignored. Families just get used to it. The line between convenience and chaos is surprisingly thin. And in scholarly circles there's still debate over whether the American home in this period was more sanctuary or prison. Some historians argue it was a sacred retreat from the industrial grind. Others see it as a tightly controlled environment, especially for women, meant to reinforce the social order. The truth, as always, probably lives somewhere in the middle. You take one last look around the house, the dim corners, the ticking clock, the heavy drapes, and step back out onto the porch. The late afternoon sun has started to dip, casting everything in long shadows. You feel like you've lived a week in just one day, but there's still so much more to see. Back out on the porch, you sit for a moment, letting the day settle around you. The cicadas buzz lazily from the trees, and someone nearby is mowing a lawn with a real mower that squeaks with every push. A delivery boy rides by on a bike, newspaper bags slung over his shoulder, tossing headlines onto stoops with more accuracy than most people today could manage in a video game. But even as the town hums around you, the rhythms of the house you just left still cling to your skin. Because here's the thing, family life in 25 isn't just about where you live. It's about who's doing what and why. You slip back in time again, through another doorway into another home, and find yourself watching a family from the inside out. At the head of the table sits the father. He's quiet, stoic, carved out of wood emotionally, but very much alive. He works a full day, maybe at the mill, the rail yard, the bank, or the local paper. His word is law in this house, and his approval is currency. The kids shift when he clears his throat. Even the dog tenses. Next to him, the mother is the universe's most efficient multi-tool. She's cooked breakfast, packed lunches, done the wash with a hand-cranked wringer, ironed shirts, mended socks, and managed a toddler's nap, all before lunch. She wears a simple dress, maybe a pearl button at the collar, and her hands are always in motion. She doesn't sit often, and when she does, she's darning something. Being just a housewife in your 25 is like being the COO of a company that never sleeps. You notice quickly, this home runs on roles, not dialogue. There's an unspoken code here, inherited from the Victorian age but softened slightly by modern touches. Men are providers, women are caretakers, children, well, they're assets in training. You work, you obey, and if you're lucky, you earn a small cookie and a kiss on the head before bed. And speaking of kids, your attention turns to the 3 children seated at the table. The oldest, a boy of maybe 12, has his hair parted like a politician and a collared shirt that he's expected to keep clean all day. He's being groomed for responsibility, already answering the door when visitors knock and calling adult men sir. The middle child, a girl around 9, helps her mother with the younger one. She's being raised for the domestic sphere. There's a doll tucked under her chair and a dish towel in her hand. The baby, barely 3, is seated in a high chair with a spoon clutched like a weapon. He's a chaos agent in a world of structure. The dynamic is clear. Boys are being shaped into leaders, girls into helpers. Children don't get much say in any of it. They rise early, dress neatly, and complete chores with the gravity of interns trying to impress a terrifying boss. Because I said so is not up for debate. And free time, that comes only after the wood is chopped, the fire is stoked, the milk is brought in from the porch, and the dishes are dried and put away. Discipline, as you might have guessed, is not subtle. Spankings are common, sometimes with a switch from the backyard or a wooden spoon. Timeouts aren't a thing. Consequences are swift and usually physical. It's not about cruelty so much as order, a belief that children are born wild and must be shaped. That doesn't mean love isn't present. It's just often wrapped in duty, not affection. Hugs are rarer than chores. Praise is whispered, not shouted. Still, there are tender moments. The father ruffles his son's hair when no one's watching. The mother sings softly while braiding her daughter's hair before church. There's warmth here, just quiet warmth, filtered through layers of propriety and expectation. You begin to understand why nostalgia for this time runs so deep. It wasn't necessarily better, just more defined. People knew their lanes, even if those lanes were narrow and unfair. You step into the backyard and find the rhythm continues there. The father chops wood in his shirt sleeves while the son carries logs in a wheelbarrow that's almost too big for him. The daughter helps hang wet laundry on a line, clothespins clamped between her teeth. There's a small garden too, rows of carrots, beans, maybe some rhubarb. Homegrown food isn't a hobby, it's basic economic sense. Even urban families often keep backyard chickens or rabbits. Fresh eggs mean one less trip to the store. Inside, the mother irons clothes with a heavy metal iron she's heated on the stove. There's no thermostat here, no plug, just heat and timing. She wipes sweat from her brow and checks the clock, nearly time to start dinner, again. You pause by a small bookshelf in the corner of the parlour and notice the reading material. Good housekeeping, the ladies' home journal, maybe a Bible, and a well-used etiquette guide. These are the instruction manuals of the time, teaching women how to manage a home, raise moral children, and please their husbands, all with a smile and minimal sighing. Men, meanwhile, have Popular Mechanics or the Saturday Evening Post, which cover everything from war stories to how to build a canoe in your backyard using only nails and toxic ambition. And yet, outside the home, the roaring undercurrent of change is undeniable. Women now have the right to vote thanks to the 19th Amendment, ratified just 5 years ago. A small but growing number of them work outside the home, especially in cities, typing pools, department stores, telephone switchboards. They are pushing boundaries, and some households are quietly shifting with the times. But in most places, the traditional family structure still rules, and breaking from it comes with whispers, stares, and maybe a visit from your concerned aunt. Stroll. There's a kind of security in this rigidity, for those who fit into it. The expectations are clear. You grow up, get a job, or a husband, raise kids, teach them the same rules, and repeat. There's a life map. No existential dread about your career path or fear of falling behind on social media. Just work, family, and maybe a nickel matinee on Saturday if you've behaved. There's ongoing academic debate about this era's family values. Some argue it was a golden age of cohesion and unity. Others see it as a time of suffocating roles and repressed identity. Was it stable? Yes. Was it fair? Not even close, but it's the world as it was, structured, orderly, and intensely domestic. As evening approaches, the family gathers around the table again. A prayer is said. Food is passed quietly. The baby bangs a spoon and the father raises an eyebrow. Order is restored in a heartbeat. After dinner, the kids might read aloud, or the parents might play a board game. Part cheesy or checkers, nothing too wild. And when bedtime comes, it comes early. Lights out by 9 because tomorrow's coming fast and everyone has a job to do. You step back outside, blinking into the growing dusk. The porch light glows weakly, just a single bulb. But it's enough. Inside that house, the world spins slowly, like a record on a Victrola. Predictable, confined, safe for some, stifling for others, but undeniably full of life. You're up early the next morning, because the house is up early. In night 25, nobody sleeps in unless they're sick or dead. The sun is barely poking through the curtains, and already you can hear movement from the kitchen. Pans clatter, water boils, and the floorboards groan as bodies begin their carefully choreographed morning routine. You shuffle into the kitchen, stomach growling, and the smell of food hits you with an intensity that feels primal. It's not just coffee and toast, it's a full production. The table is already set. Mismatched china, thick cloth napkins, heavy forks that could double as gardening tools. On the stove, a cast iron skillet sizzles with bacon, real bacon. Thick cut fat still popping, sending curls of smoke toward the ceiling. Eggs are being fried in the grease, no avocado toast here. There's oatmeal bubbling in a pot, and maybe, if it's a lucky morning, someone's baking biscuits from scratch, cutting them into rounds with the rim of drinking glass. And the smell? Warm, salty, slightly burnt on one edge. Perfection. You sit down, grabbing a tin cup of black coffee that tastes like regret and radiator water, but it does the trick. There's no cream unless someone milked the cow yesterday, and sugar is a luxury, not a given. Breakfast in 25 isn't a casual grab-and-go situation. It's hearty, it's hot, it's necessary. People have physical work ahead, whether it's at a factory, on a farm, or in a house without appliances. Calories are fuel, not guilt. But the real kicker? Dinner is actually lunch, often called dinner back then, while the evening meal is supper. It's confusing, sure, but try not to overthink it. The point is, 3 meals a day are standard, and nearly all are eaten at home. Restaurants exist, of course, especially in cities, but the average family isn't eating out unless it's a special occasion, or they're travelling, which is rare. You walk back into the kitchen after a few hours pass. It's quiet now, except for the ticking clock and the faint creak of a rocking chair upstairs. The family's gone to work or school, but you're hungry again, and your curiosity turns towards the pantry. Welcome to the wonderful, bizarre world of 1925 cuisine. First of all, you're going to need to recalibrate your taste buds. This is the golden age of canned everything. Green beans, peaches, sardines, deviled ham, all preserved in tin and ready for war or Wednesday night. Canned soup is a revolution. Cream of mushroom is considered fancy. And the textures? Think mushy meets metallic with a sprinkle of mystery. Then there are the gelatin salads. Oh yes, Jell-O has already hit its stride by now, and Americans are in love. Lime Jell-O with shredded carrots, lemon Jell-O with mayonnaise and olives, suspended tuna chunks. You gag a little just picturing it, but this is peak culinary fashion. Into 25, if it jiggles, it dazzles. The more layers, the better. A woman might spend 3 hours perfecting the mould for her church potluck, only for it to collapse into a crime scene the moment it's unmoulded. And yet there's real beauty in this food too. Bread is baked fresh, thick and hearty, often made with whole grains because that's what's available. Potatoes are served with everything. Butter is churned, or at least bought from someone who churns. Meatloaf is a staple, held together by breadcrumbs and sheer will. If you're vegetarian, good luck. But if you're carnivorous and okay with a little gristle, you'll eat well. You pour yourself a glass of buttermilk, which tastes like if milk had a grumpy cousin. It's sour, thick, and considered healthy. People drink it on purpose, with meals or as a snack. You do your best not to spit it out. Across the room, a cookbook sits open on a stand, or it's yellowed and hand-annotated, filled with recipes that require 0 electric appliances and a surprising amount of lard. Lard, by the way, is in everything. Pastries, frying, biscuits, you name it. It's the coconut oil of N25, only piggier. Desserts are a mixed bag. If it's a special day, maybe there's apple pie cooling on a windowsill like something from a Norman Rockwell fever dream. Or maybe it's vinegar pie, a Depression-era invention meant to fake the brightness of lemons. Sounds awful, but somehow it works. Fruit cobblers, bread puddings, and rice custards also show up often. Simple full ingredients, big flavours, and an intense reliance on sugar when available. Snacks? Well, you're not reaching for Cheetos. You might get a handful of peanuts, a scoop of penny candy, or a slice of cold leftover meat. Popcorn is popular and surprisingly easy to make. Just toss kernels into a cast iron pan with a lid and hope for the best. You could also get your hands on a buttercracker sandwich, which is 2 saltines mashed together with peanut butter and hope. And here's the thing, people in 1925 eat with purpose. There's no guilt spiral about carbs or cholesterol. Food is nutrition and love and ritual, not a crisis. Nobody's tracking calories or pretending cauliflower is pizza. They just eat what's there and they eat it together. Even so, not everything is wholesome and homespun. Food safety is sketchy at best. There are no sell-by dates. Pasteurization isn't universal. And if the milk smells off, you don't drink it. Simple as that. Meat can be questionable, especially if it's sat on a train for too long. Iceboxes help, but they're inconsistent, and people are just starting to learn about bacteria. You're more likely to get food poisoning from bad ham than you are from eating raw cookie dough. Though yes, raw cookie dough exists, and people have been sneaking bites forever. One quirky fact: in this era, Kellogg's cornflakes are considered health food, born out of a sanitarium's strange obsession with preventing unhealthy urges. Look it up if you want your brain scrambled. But in the meantime, cereal is becoming the go-to breakfast shortcut, though many still prefer hot oatmeal or cream of wheat. And coffee? People drink it all day, even at dinner, often with evaporated milk and a mountain of sugar. As the day wears on, you start to understand just how much of daily life is built around cooking, eating and cleaning up afterward. No DoorDash, no frozen entrees. Just routine, and that creates a certain rhythm. Everyone in the household plays a part. Kids set the table, mothers stir and chop, fathers carve and serve, and yes, the gender roles are ironclad. But so is the sense of shared purpose. A meal isn't just about food, it's an anchor. By the time supper rolls around, 6 p.m. sharp, you've earned it. Maybe it's meatloaf again, or fried chicken if the family splurged. Boiled vegetables, fresh bread, a slice of pie. You eat with your hands more than you expect. You lean back afterward, stomach full, the kitchen still warm from the oven. Food in N25 may not have molecular foam or truffle oil, but it has soul. It's tied to time and place, to effort and intention. It tastes like labour and leftovers, like the clink of silverware and the quiet after a long day. And honestly, you could get used to it, if the jello doesn't kill you first. You wake up the next day, and before you even open your eyes, you know today is going to be different. There's a special tension in the air, a low buzz of excitement from downstairs. The way a house feels right before church or a wedding or, yep, you guessed it, a trip into town. But not just any trip. Today you're getting dressed. And by dressed, we don't mean throwing on sweats and whatever's clean. No, this is N25. And getting dressed is an event. You drag yourself to the washstand and splash your face with cold water from the ceramic pitcher. It wakes you up with a slap of reality. There's no hot tap unless someone fired up the boiler. And yes, you're brushing your teeth with a chalky powder that tastes like mint-flavoured sidewalk. Once you're semi-conscious, it's time for the ritual. First, undergarments. And no, not just your basic briefs. For women, it's a multi-layered affair: chemise, bloomers, a corset or girdle if you're feeling formal, and then maybe a slip or a camisole. That's before the actual dress. You may lose a small percentage of your will to live before breakfast. For men it's less complicated but no less rigid. Underwear and undershirt, socks pulled high, dress pants with a button fly that takes longer than it should, a collared shirt always collared, suspenders or a belt and a tie. Not always fancy but presentable. You do not leave the house looking relaxed unless you're trying to scandalise the mailman. For everyday women, the go-to outfit is the drop waist dress, a silhouette that floats straight down from the shoulders, sacrificing curves for cool, clean lines. Made of cotton or lightweight wool, maybe linen if you're wealthy. Colours are muted during the day, navy, taupe, pale green. At night, bring out the sequins. We're talking flapper dresses with fringe that sways like jazz in fabric form. But again, this is 1925. If you're wearing that kind of dress in public, someone's raising an eyebrow, or an entire church committee. You check yourself in the mirror, your hair is a mess naturally. If you're a woman, you might be sporting a bob, which is making waves across the country, both literally and metaphorically. Short hair on women is radical, liberating, and, to your surprise, surprisingly high maintenance. You try curling it under with a hot iron that looks like it belongs in a blacksmith's forge, singe urea slightly. Great start. Makeup in 1925 is a curious thing. For the first time it's actually becoming mainstream, but not without controversy. You open the vanity drawer and find cake mascara in a tin, applied with a tiny brush and a prayer. There's a pot of rouge that looks suspiciously like clown paint, and lipstick in deep red that still makes society uncomfortable. Only fast women wear noticeable makeup. At least that's what the old ladies say. But honestly, fast sounds fun. Men aren't off the hook either. Your male wardrobe is built around suits, and yes, you're expected to wear one almost everywhere. Even to the ballpark, even to the grocery. Maybe not to mow the lawn, but even then, you're not wearing shorts. Shorts are for children and British colonials. You slide into a wool blazer that weighs roughly the same as a golden retriever. It's structured, stiff, and makes you look like you mean business, even if your business is just buying eggs. And then, the hat. Nobody, and we mean nobody, leaves the house bareheaded. For women, it's a cloche, bell-shaped, snug, often adorned with ribbon or embroidery. It sits low on the forehead, just above the brows, making everyone look slightly mysterious or slightly annoyed. For men, it depends on the season. Straw boater for summer, felt fedora for fall. Either way, the hat is non-negotiable. It's part status, part sunblock, part social contract. You step out the door and immediately you feel it. The clothes have weight. You move differently, straighter posture, slower steps. You're sweating just a little because wool does not breathe. But you look good, or at least appropriate, which in 25 is far more important. Nobody is out here trying to go viral. They're trying to be respectable. As you walk through the neighbourhood, you spot your neighbours out and about. The mailman wears a uniform that would put most modern suits to shame. A school teacher passes by in a shirtwaist dress with a brooch pinned at the collar. Even the kids look sharp. Buttoned-up shirts, knee socks, hair parted with precision. There's a sense that everyone is playing a part in the same daily theatre, and clothing is the costume. Now you wander into a department store downtown, one of those grand temples of retail with polished wood floors, arched ceilings, and the soft smell of perfume lingering in the air. You're here to observe one of the strangest little corners of fashion history, men's garters. Not the lacy kind. These are fabric bands worn around the calves to keep socks from drooping. Yep, droopy socks are considered a tragedy in 25. There are also arm garters, which help shorten shirt sleeves to the perfect length if your tailor got a little ambitious. It's practical, sure, but also kind of ridiculous in a charming steampunk way. You head upstairs, where rows of mannequins showcase the latest trends. Women's fashion is finally breathing, literally. The corset is on its way out. Dresses no longer cinch at the waist but hang loose, and hemlines are climbing, by 1925 standards at least. Knees are starting to make public appearances, and it's causing moral panic. You overhear two older ladies whispering about scandalous skirts and those jazz clubs, as if the world is teetering on the edge of chaos. It is, and the chaos has fringe. Fashion, you realise, is political in 1925. What you wear says everything. A short hemline can mean rebellion, a suit can open doors, a hat can command respect. For women especially, dressing differently is a signal. I'm not my mother. I make my own money, I go out alone. For men, the rules are slower to change, but small shifts are happening. Thinner ties, cuff trousers, looser fits. The world is leaning forward, outfit by outfit. There's debate among scholars about how radical this fashion revolution really was. Some argue it was just cosmetic, new silhouettes, same expectations. Others say it laid the groundwork for the gender shifts that would follow in the decades to come. But one thing's for sure, how you looked in 1925 shaped how you were treated. People didn't just notice your clothes, they read them like a newspaper or a secret code. As you step back outside into the street, you feel the full effect of being dressed for the era. You're not invisible. You're part of something, structured, yes, but expressive in its own quiet way. Every stitch says something, every pleat means something. And even though your shoes pinch and your waistband is plotting your demise, there's something satisfying about putting on clothes that demand the world pay attention. You tip your hat to a stranger who tips his right back. That's the code. And just like that, you're dressed not just for the day, but for the decade. You decide to spend the day with a different perspective. Lower to the ground, shorter legs, grass-stained knees. You're a kid now, dropped smack into 1925 with all the wonder, boredom and bruises that come with it. And spoiler, being a kid in this era is not a pastel-coloured postcard of innocence. It's work, it's freedom, it's rules you don't understand and chores you can't avoid. It's also kind of magic in that half-feral, slightly unsupervised way. You wake up to the sound of someone pumping water in the yard. A rooster's crowing nearby like it owns the neighbourhood. And your first thought is, I'm starving. There's no cereal box with a cartoon tiger waiting on the table. If you want breakfast, you help make it. Grabbing eggs from the coop, maybe washing a few carrots to slice thin for the stew that's going to simmer all day. And don't even think about skipping chores. Before playtime, you've got to feed animals, sweep the porch, and maybe even haul firewood if you're on a farm. That's the price of being part of the crew. Once your hands are sufficiently blistered and you've inhaled a bowl of oatmeal thick enough to patch drywall, you're finally released. No school today, it's Saturday, and that means the world is your playground. You burst out the front door, hat jammed over your ears, and look for your gang. That's what kids did. They ran in packs, barefoot or in scuffed boots, chasing each other with sticks and wildly varying imaginations. Your friends show up one by one. Billy's got a bag of marbles, Jenny's dragging a doll that's more rags than toy, and Tommy's showing off a new slingshot he carved from a tree branch and some inner tube rubber. It's already caused damage. The world's your arena. No playdates, no supervision, no helmets. Just long hours under a sun that doesn't judge, and a neighbourhood that knows whose kid belongs where. You start with a game of kick the can, which involves a coffee sill, a lot of running, and just enough rules to start a war. The street is the field. Sidewalks, curbs, and alleyways all become part of the map. Every porch is fair game for hiding, and when Mrs. Thistle down the road yells at you for trampling her rose bushes, it's just part of the ambience. After you've run yourself breathless and sweaty, someone suggests heading down to the creek. That's code for, we're about to get very wet and slightly injured. You take off, a pack of yelling kids barreling through yards and hopping fences. At the creek the air smells like algae and damp mud. Shoes come off, you skip stones, catch frogs, and build an elaborate dam that'll collapse the moment someone's older brother shows up to stomp through it. The weird thing? Nobody's filming this. There's no parent crouched behind a phone whispering, "Okay, now jump, smile." Your childhood is unrecorded. Memories live only in the retelling. The scrapes, the screaming, the victorious discovery of a dead turtle shell, it all belongs to you and your friends, passed back and forth like secrets. You dry off in the sun and eat whatever's in your pocket. A chunk of bread wrapped in wax paper, a peppermint, maybe an actual turnip if your mum thinks that counts as a treat. Later you might stop at the local corner store and buy penny candy, licorice whips, horehound drops, or wax bottles filled with vaguely terrifying fruit syrup. Your tongue turns colours you didn't think existed in nature. As the afternoon settles into a golden haze, you regroup at someone's yard for a round of Red Rover, or maybe a makeshift baseball game with a cracked bat and homemade bases. No adult umpires, no sunscreen, just rules everyone argues over and then sort of enforces. If you're lucky, the neighbour's older sister comes outside with a Victrola and plays something scandalous jazz music, the kind that makes parents twitch and kids shimmy. You do your best, Charleston, mostly arms and knees, and hope no one tells your mum. You realise pretty quickly that being a kid aged 25 means navigating contradictions. You're expected to act like a miniature adult, say yes ma'am, stand when elders enter the thieves' room, and maybe even hold down a small job. But you're also left alone for hours at a time to roam fields and climb trees like a woodland gremlin. Independence is woven into every part of your day. You learn by doing, messing up, getting scolded and doing it again. And school? You're not thinking about that now, but it's a big part of your world. Come Monday, you'll be back in a one-room schoolhouse, where boys and girls sit on opposite sides and the teacher might paddle you for talking out of turn. You learn cursive before multiplication. You recite poetry aloud and stand when called on. There's no air conditioning, sometimes no heat, just a blackboard, some desks, and a lunch pail full of cold biscuits and hard-boiled eggs. But for now, there's just the slow stretch of a Saturday, your fingernails full of dirt and your arms sore from swinging off tree branches. There's a freedom to this life, rough and wide open. You aren't micromanaged, monitored, or scheduled. You live by the sun, you learn from your friends, you make your own entertainment with a stick and an old tin can, and somehow it's enough. There's one kid in the group who's different. A bit quiet, always sketching something in a notebook. You glance over his shoulder and realise he's been drawing the group all day. Stick figures, sure, but you can tell who's who. He's capturing something most people will forget. Years from now, people will argue about whether kids in this era had it better or worse. Some say the lack of structure built grit. Others say it left kids unprotected and undereducated, and both might be right. Evening comes on slow. Fireflies start blinking like Morse code above the grass. Someone's mum rings a dinner bell and the gang starts to break apart. You walk home with a limp from a scraped knee and the faint glow of sunburn across your nose. You're filthy, exhausted, and completely satisfied. Inside, someone wipes your face with a damp cloth, and you eat supper, half asleep. Later, you crawl into bed in long underwear, listening to the crickets outside and the occasional hoot of an owl. The world feels both enormous and completely yours. No screens, no alarms, just the slow, simple unravelling of a day you'll remember in flashes. Grass stains, creek water, jazz, laughter. And in that last moment before sleep, you realise this was a good day to be a kid. Maybe one of the best. It's Monday morning and no one's thrilled about it. Not even the sun, which seems to drag itself over the rooftops like it hit snooze one too many times. You're yanked out of bed before you're ready, still sore from your creek adventures, and shuffled toward a pitcher of lukewarm water for a quick wash. Breakfast is oatmeal again, this time lumpy and somehow both too hot and too cold. But there's no time to complain, because today you're heading off to school in 25, and let's just say, it's not going to feel like homeroom with beanbags and iPads. You strap on your school satchel, no backpacks yet, and just a canvas shoulder bag or maybe a belt holding your books together. Inside, a slate board, chalk, maybe a fountain pen if your family's doing alright, and your lunch wrapped in wax paper. No thermos, no snack packs, just a sandwich made from last night's meatloaf and a chunk of apple with a little browning you'll ignore later. Walking to school isn't a lifestyle choice, it's your only choice. Buses do exist, but only in more populated areas, so you trek down dirt roads or sidewalks, dodging horse manure, puddle deals, and the occasional cat fight. Along the way, you pick up your fellow classmates, some barefoot, some in scuffed boots, most wearing hand-me-downs that have seen too many winters. Your best friend's wool coat has elbow patches, not for style, but because his older brother wore right through the sleeves last year. The building looms ahead, a one-room schoolhouse, weather-beaten, and a little crooked, with a bell tower that leans slightly to the left like it's thinking about retiring. Inside, it smells like chalk, wood smoke, and the faint panic of unfinished assignments. Desks are lined in rows, nailed to the floor, each one with a carved inkwell and a few ancient initials scratched into the surface. There's no heat unless someone's remembered to stoke the potbelly stove in the corner, and in winter, you keep your coat on until your fingers thaw enough to grip a pencil. Your teacher, probably a woman in her 20s or a man in his 40s with a moustache that could win awards, greets the class with a firm nod. No, hey guys, no cozy introductions, just good morning, take your seats, and you do, fast. Here's how school works in 1925. Everyone shares one room, from the littlest first graders to towering 8th graders who've already begun shaving. The teacher teaches multiple grades at once, sometimes pausing to drill spelling with the younger ones while the older kids copy arithmetic from the blackboard. You learn to tune in and out with ninja-like precision, waiting for your year's lesson to come around. If you're lucky, you have a textbook. If not, you're copying problems off the board with a stub of chalk and praying you don't sneeze and erase half of it. Today's subjects: Reading, writing, arithmetic, the 3 R's, though only one of them actually starts with R. You practice penmanship by copying maxims like cleanliness is next to godliness and idle hands are the devil's workshop. Cursive isn't optional. Neither is discipline. If you talk out of turn, the teacher doesn't redirect you. They might smack the ruler against your desk, or worse, your knuckles. It's not personal, it's just how order is kept. You read aloud from McGuffey's Reader, a hodgepodge of morality tales, Bible verses, and stories designed to teach both literacy and ethics. In one story, a boy gets eaten by wolves for lying to his mother. In another, a girl redeems her family's honour by never crying. Heavy stuff for 9 a.m, but the message is clear. Virtue vibes. When it's time for math, the older kids work on long division, while the little ones count beans. Literally. Beans, buttons, sticks, anything to help teach numbers. There are no calculators in disguise, just your brain, your slate, and the occasional headache. At recess, you burst outside like you have been freed from prison. The yard is just a dirt patch with a seesaw, a few jump ropes, and maybe a tyre swing if your school got a donation from the PTA, which is probably just 2 mums and a pastor. You play tag, climb trees you're not supposed to, and trade marbles or play duck on a rock, which sounds fake but is 100% a real game involving throwing stones at a bigger stone. No safety goggles, no one cares if you skin your knee. If you're bleeding, someone finds a rag and tells you to walk it off. Back inside, it's time for recitation, where you stand at the front and say something you've memorised. Maybe a poem, the Pledge of Allegiance, yes, it's already a daily thing, or a few Bible verses if you're at a rural school where religion and public education are deeply tangled. You do it nervously, your eyes glued to the teacher, praying you don't forget a word, and if you do, you might be asked to stay after class and practice. You glance around and notice something else. The school is mostly white. In many places, especially the South, schools are segregated by race, with black children attending underfunded, poorly supplied schools, often with second-hand textbooks and overcrowded classrooms. In native communities, children are still being sent to boarding schools, often far from home, stripped out of their language and culture in the name of civilizing. This is one of those harsh realities N25 doesn't try to hide. It just pretends is normal. Meanwhile, education for girls is growing, but with limitations. Most families still expect daughters to marry young and run households, but change is in the air. Some girls read Little Women and imagine college, careers, something bigger than soup and sewing. Others are already working, their school days behind them by 12 or 13. School is a window, for some a narrow one, for others the only one they'll ever get. After hours of rote memorization and chalk dust, the bell rings. You exhale. Lunch was 6 hours ago, and your brain feels like it's been sandpapered. You walk home in the fading light, maybe stopping to throw a rock at a stump or dare someone to eat a weird bug. Homework? Maybe a little, but mostly you'll spend the evening helping with chores or reading by lamplight if you're lucky enough to have one. And as you curl up that night, sore from sitting on a hard bench and mentally scarred by a story about a boy who drowned for skipping class, you realise something odd. You did learn today, not just spelling and subtraction, but how to sit still, how to wait your turn, how to be part of something bigger. There's a simplicity to it, a discipline that borders on drudgery but never quite tips over. Of course, scholars still argue about whether one-room schoolhouses actually worked. Some say they fostered independence, resilience, and a tight-knit community. Others argue the model stifled creativity and left too many kids behind. Either way, for millions of children in N25, this was education. Chalk and sweat and the occasional head smack, and somehow it laid the foundation for the entire century to come. The sun rises slow and steady, but you're already awake, pants half buttoned, lacing up scuffed shoes that barely remember what dry feels like. You've got dirt under your fingernails and a lunch pail in one hand, a dented tin box holding a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, and maybe an apple that's seen better days. Because today you're heading to work. That's right, in N25 everyone works, and if you're old enough to tie your shoes without crying, you're probably old enough to earn your keep. Let's get one thing straight. This isn't follow your dreams territory. Nobody's asking what your passion is or if the office has kombucha on tap. Work in N25 is gritty, loud, physical, and most of it smells vaguely like burnt metal or wet hay. The idea is simple. Do your job, keep your head down, get paid, survive. Glamorous, not even a little. But vital, absolutely. You start your day at a textile mill, and the second you walk in, the sound hits you like a slap, machinery thundering, clanking, whirring, all in chaotic rhythm. It's deafening. Workers move like clock parts themselves, weaving between machines, threading spools, checking for jams. You take your place at a loom, hands moving automatically after just a few minutes of training. Repetition is king here. Mistakes mean injury, or worse, getting fitted. The floor smells like grease and cotton dust. There's no air conditioning, no breaks except lunch, and definitely no safety rails. Your fingers ache from the vibrations. The foreman walks by with a cigarette stuck to his lip, barking at someone to pick up the pace. You're sweating through your shirt by noon, but you keep going, because you need that paycheck, even if it's just a few dollars a week. And if you think you're too young to be doing this kind of work, think again. Child labour is still common, especially in poorer families. You might be 12, no one blinks. After your shift, you swap roles for a bit. Now you're working in a coal mine just to round out the day. You cram yourself into a narrow cart and descend into darkness that feels alive. The walls are slick with moisture. The air is thick, damp, and tastes like rust. You're handed a pickaxe and told to watch for cave-ins. Like that's just a casual Tuesday warning. You cough, already feeling the sting of coal dust in your lungs. There's no mask, no goggles, just your cap with a tiny flickering lamp that somehow makes the darkness worse. You work shoulder to shoulder with men twice your age, faces blackened, hands calloused. Some hum tunes to themselves to keep sane, others just work in silence, saving their breath. The deeper you go, the hotter it gets. The pressure builds, and in the back of your mind you remember hearing something about black lung, but no one here talks about it. They just cough more. Later you surface into the evening light like a mole blinking into the sun, and the shock of clean air almost makes you dizzy. You wipe your face with your sleeve. It leaves more grime than it removes. But you made it through another shift. No injury, no trouble. That counts as a win. Of course, not everyone works in factories or mines. If you're a woman, especially a single one, your options are narrower but growing. You might find yourself behind the counter at a department store, hair pinned in tight, standing all day in low heels, pretending that the customer is always right even when they clearly aren't. Your job is to be polite, knowledgeable, and invisible unless needed. Don't flirt. Don't talk back. And for the love of all that's decent, don't wear too much rouge, or someone might report you for being fast. Or maybe you're a telephone operator seated at a switchboard with a headset made of metal and discomfort. Your job? Plugging and unplugging cables faster than you thought humanly possible. Number, please, becomes your mantra, and you say it 50, maybe 100 times a day. You're the invisible glue of national communication, and if someone gets snippy, you smile through your teeth and connect the call anyway. The line between independence and burnout is razor thin. Then there are the jobs no one sees. The women scrubbing floors in rich folks' houses, their backs bent before the sun even rises. The nannies who raise other people's children while their own are left at home. The janitors, the porters, the farmhands, the domestic workers who keep the country running, but barely get a footnote in the history books. Their pay is low, their hours long, and they never stop moving. For many black Americans, this is the only work available, manual, service, and agricultural labour, thanks to deeply embedded racial barriers that shut them out of higher-paying industries. Segregation doesn't end when school does. It follows people right into the workplace. You notice quickly that pay scales, job titles, and opportunities shift drastically depending on the colour of your skin or the accent of your last name. Yet even in the harshest conditions, there's pride in the work. At the end of the day, workers gather on stoops or in boarding houses, peeling off their boots, counting their coins, and swapping stories. They talk about foremen and factory owners, about strikes and union dues. The labour movement is gaining traction, inch by inch, battle by battle. Unions are forming, protests are stirring. It's not safe, but it's happening. Workers are realising their worth, even if the bosses haven't. You visit a print shop in town where the smell of ink and paper mixes with pipe smoke. Typesetters clack away, arranging tiny metal letters in rows with surgeon-like focus. It's skilled work. Quiet, meticulous, one wrong press ruins the whole page. Here you learn that not all work in 1925 is brute force. Some of it is art. Precision, patience, and a strange sort of pride that sticks to your fingers like ink. One quirky side note, time clocks are new, and workers are obsessed with them. Punching in and out is both a ritual and a small rebellion. proof you existed, you worked, you mattered for exactly X number of hours. Some scholars even argue that the punch clock changed how people understood their own value, not just what they made, but how long they made it. It wasn't about the product, it was about the time. There's a still debate over how soul-crushing or soul-forming this era of labour was. Was it exploitative? Without a doubt. Dangerous? Absolutely. But was it formative? Also yes. People in 1925 worked hard and they worked together. In factories, in fields, in homes. They created the backbone of modern America, one blister at a time. You walk home in the dark, your shirt damp with sweat, your legs aching. You pass others just like you, stoop-shouldered, tolulant, smelling of steel, grease, tobacco. No one complains, not out loud. But in every tired glance, every bandaged hand, there's a shared language. You earned your place today. You carried your weight. You collapse into bed with muscles humming and thoughts scrambled, your body still vibrating from the machines. And right before you drift off, you realise something simple and brutal. This is life for most people in 1925. Not glamorous, not easy, but honest, in a way the modern world rarely feels. The sun creeps up over the rooftops like it's got something to prove, casting long golden streaks across the dirt roads and trolley tracks. Today you're not walking, you're riding. You're about to get a front row seat to the chaotic, clattering, gas-scented wonder that is 1925 transportation. Buckle up. Well, actually, don't. Seatbelts aren't really a thing yet. Try not to fall out. You start the morning by hopping onto a streetcar, one of the electric trolleys that snakes through town with a screech and a spark. It's basically a wooden box on rails, jam-packed with commuters in fedoras and long coats, their briefcases jammed between their ankles. The benches are hard, the windows fog with breath, and the conductor doesn't slow down unless he has to. You grip the brass pole as the streetcar lurches forward like it's been insulted, rattling past storefronts and intersections at a respectable pace, until it hits a hill, and then, well, gravity negotiates the rest. These streetcars are everywhere in 1925 America. Cities like San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Cleveland are laced with tracks. They're cheap, reliable-ish, and they don't reek of manure, an important improvement over the horse-drawn carriages they replaced. Most people still live close enough to their jobs that a streetcar, bike, or pair of shoes gets them there. Suburbs are starting to grow, yes, but the sprawl hasn't taken over yet. For now, towns are tight and travel is communal, not isolated. After your 10-minute ride and 5 near spills, you hop off downtown and walk 2 blocks to a new experience. Your first car ride in 1925. You're not just looking at a Model T today, you're getting in one. A man with oil-stained hands and a straw hat waves you over and swings open the squeaky door. "Hop in!" he shouts, over the engine that already sounds tired. You oblige, trying not to breathe too deeply. The smell of gasoline, leather, and hot metal is strong enough to pickle your lungs. The Ford Model T, affectionately called the Tin Lizzie, is the undisputed queen of the American road. But in 25, over half the cars in the world are Model Ts. Henry Ford's assembly line has transformed it from a luxury into something the average family can actually afford. Just under $300 if you want it plain. Of course, plain means no heater, no radio, no speedometer, no real suspension. Just wheels, gas, and hope. The driver pulls a lever, cranks something, mutters under his breath, and with a judder the car kicks to life. You lurch forward. There's a kind of giddy terror to it all. The ride is loud, shaky, and unpredictable. The steering wheel feels more like a suggestion than a command, and every bump in the road translates directly to your tailbone. But despite the chaos, there's freedom here. You're moving under your own power, covering ground at a speed unimaginable a generation ago. The world is opening up mile by dusty mile. Out on the rural roads, you pass horse-drawn wagons still plodding along like the past refuses to move aside. Farmers tip their hats as you pass, and a few cows stare like you've just landed from Mars. The road isn't paved, just dirt and gravel, and every car kicks up a choking cloud of dust behind it. There's no windshield wiper, so the driver just sticks his hand out and wipes it with a rag when the bugs get too brave. You ask about gas stations, and your driver laughs. "Well," he says, "there's one in town and another 50 miles out if it hasn't shut down." You realise quickly, travel is still an adventure in 1925. Road maps are mostly a work of imagination. Gas is cheap, less than 20 cents a gallon, but finding it can be a puzzle. And roadside diners? Not yet. You pack sandwiches and hope for the best. The car breaks down once. Of course. Something rattles, something hisses, something thumps. The driver pulls over, grabs a wrench, and disappears under the hood like a surgeon in coveralls. 15 minutes later, he slams it shut, wipes his hands and shrugs. Should hold. And that's good enough. In this era, everyone's a mechanic because everyone has to be. Cars aren't just transportation, they're constantly negotiated agreements with physics and fate. Back in town, you hop off and stretch your legs, bones still humming from the ride. You take a walk toward the train station, where the centre coal and steam hangs heavy in the air. A whistle blows in the distance, louder and haunting, and moments later, a steam locomotive barrels into the platform, hissing like a dragon. It's beautiful in a kind of industrial, terrifying way. Massive wheels, shiny black engine, smoke billowing out in dramatic plumes. You step aboard a passenger train, and suddenly the world smooths out. The seats are upholstered in velvet or cracked leather, depending on your class. Windows slide down halfway. There's a rhythm to the tracks that lulls you into a half-doze. If you're lucky, or wealthy, you might be in a sleeper car with curtained berths and folding wash basins. If not, you're wedged between two strangers eating boiled eggs out of a paper bag and snoring with alarming confidence. Trains are the lifeblood of long-distance travel in 1925. Airlines are a novelty. Cars don't have the range or road network yet. So trains connect cities, towns, and the imagination. You can get from New York to Chicago in under 24 hours, if the weather holds. Porters move up and down the aisles offering drinks or collecting tickets. You watch the countryside blur past, farms, factories, forests, America in motion. Eventually you step off the train, a little soot-covered, a little dazed. The platform is crowded with soldiers on leave, families visiting relatives, salesmen in suits with sample cases that jingle. There's a sense of movement here. Travel is still special. People dress up for it. They send postcards. They wave goodbye like it matters, because it does. One quirky footnote. Bicycles are still a big deal, especially for kids and working-class adults. No gears, no helmets, just solid tyres, steel frames, and a prayer. In cities, bike messengers zip between trolleys and carts, dodging horses and angry pedestrians. In the country, bikes are lifelines, getting you to school, to work, or to town for supplies. They squeak, rattle, and leave your thighs on fire. But they're yours, and here's something historians still debate. Did transportation liberate America in 1825, or fragment it? On one hand, the Model T gave people unprecedented freedom to leave town, chase jobs, explore. On the other, it pulled families away from porches and into motion, away from neighbours and toward anonymity. It's not just the roads that changed, it's the whole idea of distance and connection. You finish the day back in your borrowed bedroom, dusty, wind-blown, and smelling faintly of coal smoke. Outside, you hear the faint ding of a trolley and the distant growl of a car turning a corner too fast. And you get it now. 1925 is on the move. The wheels are turning. And they were not going to stop anytime soon. It's Saturday, again. Your legs still sore from walking. Your ears ringing faintly from streetcar bells and honking Model Ts. But today's got a different energy. The town's awake, and it's not about work. It's about commerce, and more specifically shopping in 1925, which is one part necessity, one part social event, and one part theatre. You're about to wander through a landscape without supermarkets, Amazon, or add-to-cart buttons. Welcome to the physical economy, where if you want something, you walk to it, haggle over it, and carry it home. You start your morning with a visit to the corner grocery store. A small cramped space bursting with dry goods and the faint aroma of sawdust and pickles. The floors creak. A bell jingles when you walk in. The grocer, usually a man in a white apron with a pencil tucked behind one ear, nods at you and keeps stacking tins. There are no shopping carts. You bring a list, hand it to the clerk, and he gathers your items like you're placing a royal order. He grabs canned peaches, a sack of flour, some lard, and a small brown bag of sugar, all doled out by weight, not branding. You realise quickly that you can't just grab and go. In 1925, you build a relationship with your shopkeepers. They know your name, see your preferences, and which kid in your family always tries to sneak an extra peppermint. They might even let you buy on account, writing your purchases in a little ledger to be paid off at the end of the week. Credit cards? Laughable. This is trust-based capitalism, one dusty counter at a time. Next, you head into a five and dime, the spiritual ancestor of the dollar store. The shelves are packed with everything from buttons to bobby pins, rubber balls to hair tonics, candy sticks to cheap toys that will absolutely break within the week. It smells like soap, penny, candy, and tin. A sign above the register boasts, "Nothing over 10 cents, and you believe it, until you spot a pair of nylons in a dusty box marked 12C, scandalous inflation. Then it's off to the butcher, where the window displays are, intense. Cuts of meat hang on hooks, pink and marbled, sometimes still feathered or furred depending on how fresh the delivery was. You don't just say, "I'll take a pound of ground beef." No, you negotiate with the butcher like it's a poker match. He saws, weighs, trims and wraps the meat in brown paper with practiced speed, ties it with twine and drops it into your basket. Don't ask for tofu, don't even whisper it. Down the block is the bakery, where the air is heavy with yeast and sugar. Rows of crusty loaves sit behind glass, next to stacks of jam-filled pastries and the occasional experimental pie. You pick out a round loaf of rye, still warm, and pretend you're not going to tear into it before you get home. Spoiler, you absolutely are. One thing that catches your eye again and again are the advertisements. They're painted on brick walls, printed in newspapers, sewn into store awnings. They're everywhere and they're evolving. Companies are starting to understand the power of branding. Soap isn't just soap anymore, it's ivory, 99 and 44 100% pure. A soda bottle promises to refresh your body and mind, even though it's basically sugar and carbonation. There's a growing science to all of it. Emotional selling, tapping into aspiration and image. You're not just buying flour. You're buying the dream of a perfect pie crust and a compliment from your neighbour. After restocking your basics, you do something a little more indulgent. You step into a department store, and this is where the real magic happens. The air is cool and perfumed, the ceiling's high, the aisles wide enough for strollers, gossip, and slow twirls in front of mirrors. There are separate counters for gloves, handkerchiefs, corsets, shoes and cologne. Each counter staffed by a sharply dressed clerk who pretends to be bored but is absolutely judging your taste. Elevators are operated by young men in uniform, who politely announce each floor like you're boarding a Zeppelin. You watch a woman try on hats in front of a mirror framed by warm bulbs. She adjusts a feathered cloche and tilts her head, just so, waiting for her friend's nod. The mirror doesn't just reflect, it confirms identity. This is how modern consumerism sneaks in, not just by offering things, but by promising transformation. The store has a small cosmetics counter, a new addition that's drawing curious stares. Lipstick, rouge and powder are becoming respectable, even fashionable, though still whispered about in the church crowd. A teenage girl buys her first compact, cheeks pink for reasons that have nothing to do with blush. You stop at a nearby stall selling installment plans, a new idea that's revolutionising shopping. Can't afford a radio or sewing machine today? No problem. Put down a few dollars and pay the rest over time. You can almost hear the future revving its engine. This is the birth of buying things you can't afford yet. Debt is being dressed up as progress. Out on the street again. You pause to look at the Sears Roebuck catalogue in a shop window. It's thicker than your arm and more influential than any TikTok trend could ever dream to be. In 925, this catalogue isn't just paper, it's possibility. You can order almost anything, including furniture, tools, even an entire prefab house, and have it delivered to your door. Rural families pore over it like it's a sacred text. Kids cut out toys they'll never own. Housewives fold corners dreaming of updated kitchens with shiny enamel stoves. And yet, there's an odd duality to shopping in this era. On one hand, it's delightfully analogue, face-to-face, hands-on, steeped in social interaction. On the other, consumer culture is exploding, fueled by mass production and mass marketing. People are beginning to define themselves by what they own. A new dress, a gold watch, a phonograph. They aren't just things, they're statements. Of course, not everyone's included. Racial segregation still blocks many Americans from shopping freely, especially in the South. Coloured entrances, separate counters. Some stores don't serve black customers at all. For many, the simple act of buying a pair of shoes becomes a coded negotiation. Class divides are equally harsh. The fancy department stores are open to you if you can afford to look like you belong. Scholars still debate whether this rise in consumerism helped empower the middle class, or just locked them into a cycle of want. Did the new accessibilities to goods lift people up, or teach them to measure their worth by their wallet. Either way, 1925 marks the tipping point. Shopping is no longer just about survival, it's about identity, expression, and sometimes escape. As the sky begins to turn lavender over the buildings, you carry your parcels home, arms aching, heart oddly full. You pass no scanners, you click no buttons. But you saw people, you haggled, laughed, apologised for touching things you weren't supposed to. And you bought what you needed, and maybe one or two things you didn't. Back at home, you unpack your haul under the glow of a single light bulb, peeling away wax paper and twine like you're opening gifts. And in a way you are, because in 925 every item has weight, story and effort behind it. It doesn't arrive on your doorstep, you earn it piece by piece, block by block. It's late evening and something's different in the air. The sun is slipping behind the rooftops, painting the brickwork with a reddish glow, but nobody's going inside yet. The streets are still humming, not with delivery trucks or scrolling teenagers, but with quiet tension and the scent of illegality. Because tonight, you're stepping into the wild, weird, contradictory world of Prohibition-era America, where alcohol is banned but drinking is booming. Welcome to 1925, where the law says no, and nearly everyone says, "Cool story, pour me a drink." You start on the corner of a quiet residential block where a man in a fedora stands casually near a lamppost smoking like he's waiting for a friend. He's not. You approach, and without a word he tilts his head toward a nondescript building down the street. There's no sign, no flashing lights, just the faint pulse of jazz and the smell of spilled gin. You knock twice, then once more after a pause. Some places have passwords, others just a code knock. A tiny peephole slides open. One pair of eyes looks you up and down, then the door creaks open. You step inside and the scene hits you like a trumpet blast. The air is thick with perfume, sweat, some smoke, and saxophone. This is a speakeasy, and it's electric. People are shoulder to shoulder in a basement that was probably meant for laundry or long-forgotten luggage. Now it's soaked in candlelight and bootleg whiskey. Men in pinstriped suits sip from mismatched glasses. Women in beaded dresses and finger waves lean over the bar, laughing like they've just remembered. They don't care what anyone thinks. A jazz trio plays in the corner. Stand-up bass, piano, and a trumpet that cries like it's been wronged. The room sways into time with the music and the liquor. You feel it in your chest, that contagious rhythm of rebellion. Every clink of glass here is an act of defiance. Every laugh, a rejection of the idea that a government can legislate morality. You order a drink, you're not picky. The bartender, who looks like he hasn't slept since the war, pours something brown into a cloudy glass. It tastes like regret and lighter fluid. You don't ask questions. This isn't top-shelf bourbon. It's bathtub gin, literally made in a bathtub. Or it's bootleg Canadian whiskey smuggled in under blankets. Or rotgut made from industrial alcohol that someone filtered through bread and flavoured with desperation. Either way, your throat burns. You drink it anyway. It's hard to explain just how surreal this whole thing is without context. See, Prohibition started in 1920 with the 18th Amendment and the Volstead Act. The goal was noble enough: end alcoholism, reduce crime, clean up society. In reality, it created a booming black market, empowered organised crime, and turned the average citizen into a casual lawbreaker. You could be a church-going schoolteacher by day and a gin-sipping dance machine by night. The weirdest part? It's not just gangsters keeping this underground economy afloat, it's everyone. Doctors write fake prescriptions for medicinal whiskey. Priests quietly continue offering sacramental wine. Farmers sell fruit juice kits labelled with bold warnings like, "Do not allow to ferment," which of course is exactly what everyone does. Entire communities pretend not to know what's happening in their basements. It's the country's worst kept secret. You hear whispers tonight about Al Capone still on the rise, carving out his empire in Chicago with a mix of charm, brutality, and a never-ending stream of illegal liquor. But he's not the only one. From New York to New Orleans, entire networks of bootleggers, smugglers, distillers, and corrupt cops are turning Prohibition into a thriving, if dangerous, business. Some scholars argue that Prohibition did more to strengthen organised crime than any event before or since. But this world isn't just criminal, it's social, and gender lines are blurring here in the haze of jazz and gin. Women aren't just allowed in speakeasies, they're central to the scene. Flappers drink, dance, smoke, flirt, and toss off the shackles of Victorian restraint like yesterday's corset. You watch one light a cigarette with a flourish, blow smoke toward the ceiling and wink at a man who nearly drops his drink. It's performance art and she knows it. You're halfway through your second glass, maybe rum, maybe varnish, and the room is getting louder. The piano player's grinning now, slamming out a ragtime riff while two couples start doing the Charleston in a cleared out space near the back wall. Someone yells "raid" as a joke, and for a half second everyone freezes. Because raids are real. Federal agents, aka Prohibition officers or revenuers, routinely bust into places like this, smashing barrels, arresting bartenders, and dumping perfectly good alcohol into the street. People have been shot, lives ruined, businesses destroyed, but not tonight. Everyone laughs and goes back to dancing. You step outside for some air, the door shutting behind you like the ending of a fever dream. The alley is quiet. A cat dashes past. Somewhere distant sirens wail, but they're not headed this way. Probably. You lean against a brick wall, the night cool against your flushed skin, and you think about how strange it all is, how an entire generation has made a sport out of breaking the law, and not quietly, not shamefully, with style, with sequins. The contradictions run deep. Crime is up, corruption is rampant, but alcohol consumption? After an initial drop, it crept back up. Americans never stopped drinking, they just got sneakier. Some argue Prohibition did lasting damage to the public's respect for law. Others say it laid the groundwork for the civil liberties arguments that would shape the decades to come. Either way, the 18th Amendment is starting to crack under its own absurdity. The repeal is still 8 years off, but the countdown has begun. One last quirky twist before you head home. Many speakeasies require memberships or passwords not just to stay secret, but to create an illusion of exclusivity. In cities like New York, some underground clubs are so lavish they outshine the legitimate establishments above them. Hidden behind the bookshelves, inside back rooms, beneath flower shops. They are part of the city's nervous system now. Illegal, yes, but also necessary, essential, alive. As you walk back to your borrowed on 25 home, your head buzzing, you pass a church with its doors open for evening prayer. Inside, a small choir sings softly, the organ echoing down the street. Just across the block, a man stumbles out of another speakeasy, laughing too loud, his tie askew. The contrast is jarring and somehow perfect. This is America in 1925, prim and wild, lawful and lawless, drunk on its own contradictions, and everyone's just trying to stay on their feet. One dance, one glass, one knock at the door at a time, morning again. Your head's clear now, the smoky blur of last night's speakeasy, fading like a dream you almost remember but don't really trust. You stretch, wince a little from the sore feet, too much Charleston, not enough water, and shuffle toward the front window. Outside, the town is already humming, but not in the workaday hammer and anvil way. This is different. It's lighter. Somewhere down the block you hear the warm, bright blare of a trumpet, and suddenly you realise it's Entertainment Day in 1925. And entertainment doesn't mean screens, it means sound, spectacle, sweat, applause. You've set yourself for a journey through the wild buffet of joy, laughter and chaos that is jazz, radio and vaudeville. You start with the most revolutionary gadget in the home, the radio. You step into the parlour where a massive wooden console squats like a well-fed dog under a lace doily. There's a small dial, a couple of knobs, and a faint hum already whispering from its speaker. You twist the dial slowly, catching snippets of different stations, crackly, distant voices, the plink of piano keys, the sudden burst of a tinny laugh track. Eventually you land on a frequency that's coming in strong. A smooth baritone voice announces, "You're listening to the Columbia Broadcasting System," and suddenly the room shifts. You're in the audience of a radio drama, probably about detectives or cowboys, or suspiciously helpful ghosts. You sit back, eyes closed, and let the story take shape in your mind. A gunshot cracks, probably a balloon popped near a microphone. A door creaks, someone literally opened a door off stage. It's all smoke and mirrors, but you don't care. Your brain fills in the gaps, and for a moment, you're somewhere else entirely. This is what radio does in 1925. It shrinks the world. For the first time, people from Kansas to Connecticut can listen to the same news, the same music, the same soap opera about amnesia and scandal. It's the internet before the internet, and it's addictive. Families plan their evenings around broadcasts. Children press their ears to the speaker to hear the adventures of Little Orphan Annie. It's not just entertainment, it's a shared national ritual. Once the broadcast ends and static creeps back in, you step outside and follow the sound of something livelier. Around the corner, past the post office and down a side alley, you find a small club already throbbing with rhythm. You lean against the wall and peek through the open window. Inside, the jazz band is in full swing, stand-up bass bouncing, clarinet wailing, piano hammering out chords like it's chasing something, and right there in the middle, a trumpet player, cheeks puffed, eyes closed, lost in it. This isn't polite music, this isn't sit still and nod music, this is sweat music. It's born in New Orleans, raised on riverboats and street corners, and now it's blowing up all over the country. Harlem, Chicago, Kansas City, even sleepy little towns have caught the fever. Jazz is loud, it's unpredictable, it scandalizes the older generation. They say it's vulgar, animalistic, dangerous, and they're kind of right, but that's what makes it great. You wander inside, the rhythm wrapping around you like a too-tight coat. The floor is sticky, the crowd is swaying, and there's a girl near the front dancing with such wild abandon that her hat flies off. No one minds. This is freedom, improv, expression. And if you're good enough, if you've got the sound in your bones, you might just end up on stage. Names like Louis Armstrong and Bessie Smith are already starting to echo across the country. They're building the future one note at a time. Later, with your ears still ringing and your fingers tapping imaginary piano keys, you head back uptown toward the theatre district. Because as much as jazz owns the night, vaudeville owns the stage. You walk into a tall, boxy building lined with bulb lights and painted posters. The lobby smells like popcorn, stale perfume and mothballs. Inside, the crowd is buzzing, men in suits, women in their best gloves, kids with wide eyes and no idea what's about to happen. You find your seat plush and narrow, and the curtain rises. What follows is a fever dream of live entertainment. A magician who pulls a dove from his sock. A dog that plays piano, badly. A slapstick duo who throw pies and puns in equal measure. A woman with a voice that could knock over a chandelier. The acts keep coming, short, chaotic, wildly different, stitched together only by the MC's booming voice and the audience's applause. This is vaudeville, the original variety show. It's equal parts Broadway, carnival and talent show. Singers, dancers, comedians, jugglers, acrobats, trained birds. If it can stand on a stage and make noise, it's in. The line between genius and gimmick is razor thin. You're not supposed to think too hard, you're just supposed to enjoy it, and people do. Vaudeville theatres are everywhere in Nick 25, from massive urban palaces to dusty travelling tents. The industry is a lifeline for performers, especially those shut out of more respectable venues. Many black artists, denied roles in white-run theatres, shine on vaudeville stages, blending music, dance and comedy into unforgettable routines. It's not perfect. Minstrel acts still pollute the lineup, and racism's baked into the business, but for many performers, vaudeville is both opportunity and proving ground. As the curtain falls and the house lights come up, you realise how different entertainment feels without screens. It's loud, physical, shared. You don't scroll away or hit skip. You're in it, body and soul, surrounded by laughter and foot taps and spontaneous applause. It's not passive, it's community in motion. One strange fact you pick up from the guy sitting behind you: vaudeville is already starting to decline. Why? Movies. Silent films are exploding in popularity, and the first whispers of talkies have already begun. By the end of the decade, most of these acts will be replaced by silver screens. Some performers will make the leap, most won't. And yet, vaudeville's DNA will live on in sitcoms, sketch comedy, and late-night shows for the next 100 years. You walk home in the dark, your brain a whirlwind of radio jingles, jazz riffs, and slapstick punchlines. The street's quieter now. A man hums a tune while locking up his shop. A kid skips by with a yo-yo. The string-catching light from a passing street lamp. There's no autoplay, no algorithm, just a city winding down after filling itself with story and sound. Back in your room, you lie awake for a few minutes, still hearing the trumpet's echo and the magician's final line. Now you see it, now you don't. Entertainment in 1925 isn't about distraction, it's about attention. It demands something from you, and in return it gives you joy, release, connection, sometimes even awe. Tomorrow will bring chores, cold baths, and clunky alarm clocks. But tonight, you danced, you laughed, you listened, and you saw a piano-playing dog. Hard to ask for more than that. It's a warm Saturday afternoon and you're standing outside a building that's somehow both grand and mysterious. There's a line forming along the sidewalk. Mostly couples dressed to impress, the men in suits with starched collars and the women in dresses just scandalously short enough to show a knee. A few kids hang around, pressing their faces to the glass, their fingers sticky from penny candy. A poster near the door catches your eye. The Gold Rush, starring Charlie Chaplin, the little tramp himself. Today you're not watching TV, you're not scrolling TikTok, you're not streaming anything. Today you're going to the movies in 1925. And buckle up, because this is nothing like binge watching in bed with snacks and no pants. You buy your ticket from a booth in front, a metal and glass box where a young woman with flawless finger waves sits like a glamorous bird in a gilded cage. You hand her your dime, and she hands you a thin paper ticket, tearing it with a practiced flick. 10 cents per voice. And you're inside the palace. And yes, it is a palace. That's what they call them, movie palaces. Theatres back then are architectural overachievers, velvet curtains, carved columns, murals of Greek gods on the ceiling, and the unmistakable scent of popcorn, perfume, and heavy drapery. There's no plastic, no soda machines, no sticky seats, just grandeur. Even the poorest kid on the block can feel like royalty in here, if only for a few hours. You find your seat plush springy, bolted to the floor, and glance around. The house lights are dimming. A few people are still filing in, whispering loudly. A man drops his program and pretends not to panic as it skitters under 3 rows. The energy is building, quiet anticipation curling through the room. Everyone's here for the same reason, to be transported. And then, finally, it begins. Not with a Marvel-style thunderclap, but with a flicker, a click, and the unmistakable buzz of the projector from the booth behind you. The light beam cuts through the smoky air like a lighthouse through fog, and suddenly the screen comes alive, not with sound, but with pure glowing black and white magic. It's silent, but not silent. Down in front, just below the screen, sits a live pianist, eyes locked on the flickering frames, fingers dancing across the keys like they're trying to keep up with the chaos unfolding on screen. If the villain appears, the music drops into ominous chords. If the hero runs from a bear, the piano gallops along like a panicked horse. The entire room is stitched together by the rhythm of those notes. You're watching Charlie Chaplin, the king of silent comedy, doing what he does best, stumbling through life with charm, chaos, and a pair of impossibly wobbly shoes. He gets into a bar fight with a man twice his size, uses a roll and 2 forks to perform a ballet, and falls in love with a girl who has no idea he's broke and living in a shack. Every moment is exaggerated but human, timeless, but very much of the moment. The audience around you is laughing out loud, gasping, sighing, not in polite movie theatre silence, but full-throated, completely immersed. You lean back and let it wash over you. There's no dialogue, no sound effects except the pianist's magic, but your brain fills it all in. You feel every stumble, every hopeful glance, every heartbreak. Because in Art 25, movies don't just tell stories, they invite you to feel everything. There are no distractions, no phones buzzing, no trailers for 6 sequels in a row, just light and shadow and story. Eventually the film ends, not with a dramatic crescendo, but with a single final frame. The end. The lights rise slowly. People clap, not just politely, but because they're grateful. The pianist stands and bows. He's sweating. His hands are probably numb. You give him a silent wow as you pass. Out in the lobby, people chat about the film. They repeat their favourite moments. Someone does a bad Chaplin impression and gets a laugh. 2 teens argue about whether the girl really loved him or just felt sorry for him. You hear someone mention Rudolph Valentino. The Sheik was a hit last year, and women are still swooning over his sick hair and smouldering stare. Someone else talks about Gloria Swanson, the reigning queen of Hollywood glamour. The gossip is fast, impassioned. These aren't just actors, they're icons, the beginning of what we now call celebrity culture. But what's fascinating is how limited access still is. There's no home video, no streaming, no let's rewatch that scene. If you miss it, you've missed it. Want to see it again? Hope it plays next month. There's a reverence to that. Each screening matters more because it's finite. You leave the theatre into the late afternoon light, blinking like you've just returned from another universe. In a way, you have. Movies in 1925 are still finding their voice, literally. Talkies won't arrive for another 2 years, with the jazz singer in 1927. For now, it's all faces, bodies, expressions. Entire scenes built on raised eyebrows, tears that glisten, and gestures that carry more weight than any sentence could. Some people say the lack of sound makes silent films harder to watch. Others say it makes them more pure. There's an ongoing debate among historians and film buffs about whether the arrival of sound elevated the art form or stifled its visual innovation. Whatever side you're on, one thing is clear. In 1925, the movies are alive, big, bold, universal. A language that everyone speaks, whether they live in New York or Nebraska. Before heading home, you stop by a storefront where a dozen kids are crowded around a newsreel clip playing through a glass window. It shows people dancing at a New Year's Eve party, confetti flying, streamers in the air. The clip lasts maybe 2 minutes, grainy and overexposed, and yet they're hypnotised, because moving pictures are still miraculous. Watching people move, laugh, kiss, or cry, it's a thrill that hasn't faded yet. Not even close. You walk home as the sun dips low. It's quiet now, the streets stretching into gold and shadow, and you think about what you saw. A man chasing love and dignity through slapstick. A room full of strangers laughing together. A pianist matching every beat with his own breath. The flicker of light and life across a silver screen. Back in your room, you stare at the ceiling and replay it all in your head. Because in 1925, movies don't follow you home. They live only in memory until you see them again, or never do. That's part of their magic. They vanish, like dreams, like Chaplin, walking off into the distance with nothing but a cane and a hopeful shrug. The next morning greets you with a different energy. Less glitz, more grit. The jazz has faded, the projector's gone quiet to boopsie, and you can hear the distant thwack of a ball hitting a bat, followed by a cheer that rises like smoke over rooftops. Today's not about glamour or rebellion. It's about play. You're stepping into the world of sports and leisure in 1925, where kids use broken broom handles as baseball bats, grown men slide into home plate like their mortgages depend on it, and nobody stretches before doing anything ever. You start your day at a local sandlot, just a dusty open patch of ground behind the schoolyard, fenced in by half a dozen mismatched boards and a single splintered bench. It's here you meet the most beloved figure in American sports, baseball. If you think people are passionate about it today, try 1925, when baseball isn't just a pastime, it's practically a religion. The kids on the field are all energy and elbows, arguing loudly about who gets to play first base. No one has a full uniform. One kid's wearing his dad's fedora backward. Another has taped up his glove so many times it looks more like a puppet. They're swinging at pitches without helmets, spitting sunflower seeds, and making up rules as they go. But they're playing, with abandon, with joy, with enough yelling to alert nearby counties. In the distance, from a tiny radio perched on a windowsill, the voice of a sports announcer crackles through. A live broadcast of a Major League Baseball game, and it's a big one. Babe Ruth is playing. The Sultan of SWAT, the Colossus of Clout, the man who can eat a dozen hot dogs and still knock a baseball into orbit. In 25, he's already a legend, larger than life in every sense. His face is on trading cards, candy wrappers, and the front page of every sports section in the country. People debate his stats like scripture. You can't go 10 feet without hearing someone argue whether he's the greatest player to ever live. Spoiler, they usually agree he is. You head to a local stadium next, not Yankee Stadium, but a modest minor league park where the grass is patchy, the wooden stands creak under your feet, and every fan looks like they bet their lunch money on the home team. The smell of peanuts and cheap cigars fills the air. No jumbotrons, no kiss cam, just a scoreboard operated by hand and a sense that every pitch matters. You sit in the bleachers beside a man who spends the entire game heckling the umpire, using words that would get you banned from most PTA meetings. The players are lean, fast, and absolutely filthy within the first inning. Sliding into second base in wool pants and no padding, a true act of bravery or madness. The game is full of shouting, dust, and genuine suspense. When someone hits a homer, the whole stadium jumps to its feet in unison, hats flying, kids screaming. There's no polite applause here. It's emotional investment, loud and loyal. But baseball's just one part of the picture. You walk a few blocks and stumble across something a little more raw. A boxing gym, its door propped open with a cinder block, the smell of sweat and liniment pouring into the street. Inside, two men are sparring, fists flying, leather gloves slapping with brutal rhythm. This isn't a gentleman's sport, it's survival in motion. Boxing in 1925 is huge, and it's not just for the elite. Fights are broadcast live over the radio, listened to by millions. The heavyweight champion at this moment is Jack Dempsey, a household name and walking uppercut. He's fierce, fast, and fights like he's mad at the concept of faces. People pack arenas to watch him battle in person, or gather around radios to listen blow by blow, holding their breath with every punch. You talk to the gym owner, a wiry man with a nose that's taken a few left hooks too many. He tells you boxing isn't just sport, it's a ladder out of poverty, especially for immigrants and black athletes shut out of other paths. But it's dangerous, brutal, and the money only lasts if your memory does. You watch 2 more rounds. It's mesmerising, even as it makes your teeth ache. Later that afternoon, you visit a local park where families picnic on quilts, kids run through the grass, and young women toss hoops in the latest fitness craze. It's not CrossFit or spinning, it's ladies' calisthenics, a strange hybrid of grace, stretching and light bouncing, usually done in full skirts and with zero irony. Fitness is still a developing idea in this era. There are no gyms on every corner, no protein shakes, just fresh air, movement, and the occasional tennis match that looks more like a polite disagreement than a sport. Speaking of which, tennis is gaining ground, especially among the middle and upper classes. Courts are popping up in clubs and parks, and women are beginning to shine in the sport, yes, even in shirts that brush their ankles. Helen Wills is the name you'll hear whispered reverently. She's strong, serious, and unbeatable. Some folks are scandalised by her sleeveless tops and silent demeanour. Others are just impressed she can beat anyone in front of her with calm, efficient strokes. She's not here to be charming, she's here to win. And then there's football, still a bit of a wild animal in 1925. College football dominates, with packed stadiums and Ivy League rivalries that feel like low-grade warfare. The NFL exists, technically, it was founded in 1920, but it's still figuring itself out. The players are rough, the rules are inconsistent, helmets are made of leather, and concussions are called getting your bell rung. Most people think it's too dangerous, too unpredictable, but give it time. The sport is growing one bloody nose at a time. By the end of the day, you realise that leisure in 1925 is a physical thing. There's no binge watching, no doom scrolling, no smartwatches tracking your steps. Fun involves sweat, risk, community, and occasionally a sprained ankle. Spectators cheer without distractions. Players perform without endorsements. It's simpler, sure, but more present. Of course, not everyone gets equal access to play. Segregation keeps black athletes out of major leagues. The Negro Leagues are thriving though, with legends like Satchel Paige and Oscar Charleston already wowing crowds. But the mainstream ignores them. Same goes for women. Despite growing visibility in tennis and swimming, most female athletes are dismissed, underfunded, or scolded for being unladylike. It's progress, but slow and uneven. Scholars still argue whether the sports craze of the 1920s helped unify America, or simply distracted it from deeper issues. Bread and circuses, some say. Community and inspiration, say others. Either way, sports aren't going anywhere. They've taken root in the national soul, stitched into schoolyards, fields and living rooms, coast to coast. You end your day watching a group of boys hurling a football back and forth as the sun sets. Their passes are wobbly, their tackles enthusiastic and reckless. But their laughter is real, echoing off the empty street like a promise. This game will matter, this game will grow. And you head home covered in dust, grinning, a little sore, because for one day you got to play too. The morning starts early, earlier than you'd like, honestly, and with a blast of cold water to the face, there's no sleep in, no 15-minute shower to slowly re-enter reality. This isn't 25, and hygiene is not for the faint of heart. You splash, scrub, and shiver your way into wakefulness, using a bar of soap that smells like chalk and lye, then pat your face dry with a towel rough enough to exfoliate you down to your regrets. Welcome to health and hygiene in 1925, where cleanliness is next to godliness, and godliness is somewhere just past the outhouse. Let's start with the basics. You do not have a full bathroom. Maybe you're lucky and your house has indoor plumbing, but millions of Americans still don't. In rural areas, you're dealing with outhouses, little wooden sheds behind the house, built over a pit smelling exactly as bad as you'd imagine. There's a tin can of lime for odour control, a stack of catalogue pages in place of toilet paper, and absolutely zero lighting after dark. You'd better hope your bladder is on a polite schedule. Even in homes with bathrooms, bathtubs are a luxury and hot water requires effort. There's no twist-and-go water heater. Someone, maybe you, has to heat water on the stove, carry it in buckets and pour it into a clawfoot tub, and that's just for one person. Baths are often once a week, and whole families sometimes share the same bathwater in order, oldest to youngest. The water gets less clean and more warm soup the longer it goes. Congratulations, you're squeaky clean, sort of. Now about your mouth. You brush your teeth with a tooth powder, usually made from chalk, charcoal or baking soda, and you use a brush with bristles so stiff they could strip paint. Your gums hurt. That's normal. Toothpaste exists, but it's not mainstream yet. And dentists? Well, they exist too, but if you walk into one's office in 1925, there's a decent chance you'll walk out minus a tooth and with a new fear of chairs. Anesthetic is minimal, drills are foot-powered, and sterilisation is, well, better than nothing, but not great. You sniff your underarms and realise deodorant! That's a thing now. Sort of. It's still a relatively new invention and many people don't use it yet. Odour is considered a private problem, one that polite people don't acknowledge, even when it's politely knocking people unconscious. If you're using deodorant, it's likely a cream you rub on with your fingers, and it may or may not stain your clothes with mysterious chalky streaks. Antiperspirants exist but are controversial. Blocking sweat? What is this, science fiction? You splash on some bay rum aftershave. Burns like fire. Smells like a pirate ship. For women, a dab of cologne or violet-scented powder does the trick. Perfume is reserved for evenings or occasions. You don't just walk around smelling like gardenias because you feel like it. That's suspicious behaviour. Your hair? Well, if you're a man, you're probably using Brill cream or pomade, slicking your hair into a wave that laughs at wind and water alike. If you're a woman, you may be setting your bob with pin curls overnight, using bobby pins that occasionally draw blood. Shampoo is a bar of soap and you wash your hair maybe once a week. It's fine. It'll survive. Hats help hide everything else. As the day wears on, you start noticing just how different the public world smells too. The street is a sensory adventure. Horse droppings, still a thing. Coal smoke, car exhaust, body odour, and the cloying sweetness of cheap perfume. Everyone's doing their best, but let's be honest. There's a reason society was obsessed with talcum powder and cologne. Deodorizing is less about fresh scents and more about strategic camouflage. Lunch finds you at a soda fountain, sipping a phosphate while a kid nearby sneezes directly into the air. Germ theory exists by now, thankfully, but public hygiene is still hit or miss. Soap is not guaranteed in public restrooms. Hand sanitizer doesn't exist. And if you get sick, you'd better pray it's something your local pharmacist can handle. The doctor might come by your house with a black bag full of hope and laudanum, but antibiotics? Not yet. Penicillin won't be in widespread use for another 2 decades, so a strep throat or infected cut can still land you in serious trouble. You stop by a public bathhouse, common in urban areas, especially where tenement housing lacks plumbing. For a small fee, you get a towel, a bar of soap, and a short glorious turn under hot water. People come here weekly or before job interviews or on dates. It's cleaner than your house. No shame in it. In fact, some bathhouses are downright beautiful. Tile mosaics, big steam rooms. The works. Communal hygiene in 25 style. Then there's healthcare. You get a little paper cut and wonder if you need a bandage or a tetanus shot. You probably won't get either. Vaccinations are available, yes, diphtheria, smallpox, but there's still resistance, especially in rural communities. Public health campaigns are growing louder, with posters urging mothers to boil babies' bottles and cover that cough. But practices vary wildly. You might visit one home with a sink in every room and a medicine cabinet stocked like a pharmacy, and then another where someone's still treating coughs with onion poultices and whiskey. And childbirth. Let's talk about that for a minute. Most babies are still born at home, attended by a midwife or general practitioner. Hospitals are growing more popular for births, but they're not necessarily safer. There's no fetal monitoring, no epidural, and antisepsis is evolving. Maternal mortality rates are still high. People whisper about birth the way they whisper about death, respectfully and with a hint of fear. You spend the afternoon watching a neighbour boil linens in a huge kettle in the backyard, her face shiny with effort. She's washing clothes with a scrub board and lye soap, then wringing them out with a hand crank that could easily eat your arm if you're not paying attention. Laundry day is a full-body workout, and clean is a relative term. You want your whites to stay white? Better hope it doesn't rain for the next 2 days while they hang to dry. One curious note. You spot a man standing outside his barber shop offering tonics and miracle cures. Hair restorers, lung elixirs, something called female strengthener. The labels promise everything. The ingredients probably include alcohol, opium, or straight-up wishful thinking. The patent medicine industry is still hanging on, even as regulations begin to tighten. The line between health and snake oil is blurry, and people cross it all the time. Because when you're desperate, you'll try anything with a cork in it. Scholars often debate how clean people really were in the 20s. Some say the middle class was obsessively hygienic, scrubbing everything from children to floorboards daily. Others point out the very real lack of access to clean water, modern plumbing, and medical care for huge swathes of the population. Both things are true. In 1925, your cleanliness depends heavily on where you live, how much money you make, and what you believe about germs. You finish your day wiping your hands on a towel that still smells faintly of bleach, watching the sun set through a haze of coal smoke and cooking fires. Hygiene here is a dance, awkward, strenuous, and constantly evolving. It's not about looking good, it's about staying alive, and somehow, despite the outhouses, the tin cups, the powdered teeth, and the lukewarm tubs, people do stay alive. They adapt. They scrape, scrub, sniff, and soldier on. Because in 1925, hygiene isn't a routine. It's survival with a splash of dignity and a dash of soap. You wake to a new kind of motion. The floor beneath you seems unsteady, not from uneven boards or a passing streetcar, but from the rocking rhythm of a train winding its way through unfamiliar terrain. You're not in the same town anymore. You're headed toward Ellis Island, toward the tenements of New York, toward the rail lines stretching west. Today, you're living as an immigrant in 1925 America, and the journey begins long before you ever take a step on American soil. You imagine your past self, hunched in the hold of a steamship crossing the Atlantic, days of nausea, sweat, and prayers whispered in 3 different languages. Maybe you came from Italy, Ireland, Poland, Russia, or Germany. Maybe you fled poverty or war, or just boredom and the relentless grey of your hometown sky. You left behind everything you knew for the vague promise that America might be better. Not easier, just better. As the ship approaches New York Harbour, you stand at the railing with hundreds of others, your breath catching in your throat as the Statue of Liberty finally comes into view. She's smaller than you'd imagined, but somehow still towering, her torch a quiet invitation and a challenge. The excitement on board is electric but laced with fear. What if they send you back? You disembark and enter the maze of Ellis Island, a massive, echoing building filled with benches, lines, and assent officials to bourgeois who look as exhausted as the passengers. You're poked, prodded, asked to read signs in English. Do you have work? Are you sick? What's your name? You answer as best you can, repeating what the man next to you said. If your name is long, strange, or hard to pronounce, it might get changed on the spot. From Olszewski to Olson. From Giovanni to John. From something rich with syllables to something palatable for paperwork. Most people are allowed through, clutching papers, blinking at the noise and chaos of New York City. But some are detained. A woman with a limp, a boy with a cough. The fear of being turned away after weeks at sea is real. For the lucky, the journey continues. You fast forward to your first home, a tenement in the Lower East Side, a narrow building crammed wall to wall and floor to ceiling with families, laughter, and worry. Your apartment is 2 rooms, maybe 3 for 7 or 8 people. The ceilings leak, the plumbing groans, the air is thick with the smell of onions, coal, sweat, and the faint sweetness of laundry hanging from every window. There's no privacy, children sleep head to toe, meals are shared on crates turned sideways. But somehow there's life here, rich, messy, and loud. Every hallway sings in a different language. You pass your neighbours on the stairs, a Sicilian grandmother scolding her grandson in dialect, a Yiddish lullaby drifting from a room nearby, a Greek man playing a mournful tune on a bouzouki no one else understands. Everyone's poor, everyone's tired, but everyone belongs, at least in this one crowded corner of the world. You get a job. You have to. Maybe you're a seamstress, hunched in a garment factory, fingers blistered from long hours stitching collars and pleats. Or you're a pushcart vendor, shouting the price of apples until your throat gives out. Maybe you're a young boy hauling bricks at a construction site, too small for the work but too desperate to say no. Your wages are barely enough, rent eats most of it. But each day is a little more stable than the one before. You write letters home when you can, pressing coins into the envelope for your mother. If you're lucky, someone in your building speaks your language and can read it loud when their eyesight fails. The news from back home is always the same. We miss you, come visit, things are hard, and yet you stay. Life as an immersive in 1925 is full of contradictions. On one hand, you're told to be proud of your new country, to learn English, salute the flag, change your name if it sounds too foreign. On the other, you're constantly reminded that you're not really American. Signs in shop windows read, "No Irish need apply." Factory foremen call you slurs. Politicians accuse you of bringing crime, disease and dangerous ideas. You start attending night school to learn English faster, even as you whisper lullabies to your child in the language of your childhood. You walk down the street and spot a headline in the paper, "Immigration quotas imposed." In 1924, just last year, Congress passed the Immigration Act, placing strict limits on who could come in and from where. Northern and Western Europeans are favoured. Southern and Eastern Europeans, not so much. Asians are almost entirely barred. The gates are narrowing. If you weren't here already, it might be too late. Yet despite it all, you find community. Maybe you go to a local church where the Mass is still whispered in Latin, or a synagogue that doubles as a school during the week. Maybe you join a union, marching for better hours, safer conditions, and just the slightest taste of dignity. You're not just surviving now, you're building something brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. One quirky fact, entire neighbourhoods become mini-countries. Little Italy, Chinatown, Polish Hill. These enclaves are lifelines. You can buy familiar food, get your hair cut by someone who won't mock your accent, and speak your native tongue without shame. But there are also barriers. They keep you safe and separate. That tension between assimilation and preservation is a tightrope every immigrant walks. There's no right answer. And the children, they're all the bridge. They learn English faster than you. They pick up slang, start wearing American clothes, roll their eyes at your old world habits. They grow up between two worlds, neither fully at home in the one you left, nor quite accepted in the one they've inherited. But they carry your hopes. They'll do better. They'll go further. Scholars still debate whether the 1920s were a golden age of immigration or the beginning of the gate slamming shut. The truth is both. There was opportunity, yes, but only for some and only if you didn't rock the boat. For every success story, there's another of a family lost in bureaucracy, in poverty, in the slow erosion of identity. America offered much. It asked even more. You sit on a stoop at the end of the day, watching kids play stickball in the street while an old man plays a harmonica from a window above. The city smells like roast chestnuts, burnt coffee, and steam rising from a subway grate. And for a moment, you feel it. That rare flicker of belonging, fragile and real. Because no matter how hard it is, no matter how far from home you've wandered, you made it. And here, in the cramped shadows of brick buildings and borrowed languages, you're building a new life. One imperfect, beautiful piece at a time. You wake up to church bells. They echo softly through the neighbourhood, rising and falling with the rhythm of the city, clean, polite, respectable. But outside your window, beyond the tidy brick row houses and their white lace curtains, there's a deeper rhythm pulsing under the surface. Because today you're stepping into a version of America most people in 25 would rather ignore. You're walking into segregated realities, into neighbourhoods where the streets are just as busy, the laughter just as loud and the dreams just as bright, but the lines are sharper and harder and written into everything. You head out, turning off the main drag and into the black side of town where the sidewalks are cracked, the streetlights fewer, and the buildings just slightly more worn. These neighbourhoods exist in almost every American city, not by accident, but by design. Whether it's Harlem in New York, Bronzeville in Chicago, or the Fifth Ward in Houston, Black Americans have carved out entire communities in the face of hostility and exclusion. The signs are subtle and not so subtle. Whites-only signs on restaurant windows, separate entrances at theatres, entire schools built for black children, underfunded, overcrowded, and barely heated in the winter. The laws vary by state, but the message is the same across the country. Stay in your plurality. This is the world shaped by Jim Crow. and though its sharpest teeth are in the south, its shadow stretches nationwide. You step into a classroom at a segregated school, peeling paint, second-hand books, desks that wobble, and yet the teacher is radiant, composed, fierce in the way only someone who knows what's at stake can be. She teaches not just math and reading, but pride, history, resistance. There's a map of Africa on the wall, a photo of Frederick Douglass near the chalkboard. These kids aren't just students, they're survivors in training. Out on the street, you visit a barbershop that doubles as a community centre. Men line the walls, talking politics, baseball and blues. A copy of the Chicago Defender sits folded on a bench, a newspaper that travels from city to city, even smuggled into the South, carrying stories of injustice and hope, of violence and resistance. The headlines are often grim: lynchings, police brutality, legal battles with uphill odds. But there's pride on every page too: promotions, marriages, jazz concerts, soldiers returning home. You walk a little further and find yourself drawn by the thump of a bass line. Through an open doorway spills the sound of a piano, thick and rolling, chased by a wailing saxophone. Inside, people dance, shoulders rolling, feet stomping, arms swinging wide. This is black joy in motion, and it's unshakable. No matter the laws outside, in this room, there's only rhythm and resistance. The music is the message. Jazz, blues, gospel. It all lives here. Rooted in sorrow, but never reduced to it. Someone hands you a plate: catfish, collard greens, cornbread. The food is simple, rich and heavy with story. Recipes passed down in whispers and worn cookbooks. Flavours born from hardship and transformed into comfort. You sit, you eat, and you listen to a man talk about moving north for better pay, better schools, better chances. This is the Great Migration in full swing, with millions of black Americans leaving the South behind and heading towards cities where the racism isn't gone, but it's at least less codified. But even here, less codified doesn't mean equal. You try to check into a hotel and get turned away. The manager smiles politely and tells you they're full. You know they're not. You try to buy a ticket to a movie and get ushered to the coloured balcony, up steep steps to the far back where the projector beam cuts through cigarette smoke and dust. It's like watching life through a keyhole. You go to a restaurant and sit at the counter, only to be told the takeout window is your only option. And if you speak up, if you resist, the consequences can be immediate and brutal. Arrest, beatings, worse. The Ku Klux Klan is not just some hooded fringe group lurking in shadows. In 1925, the Klan is mainstream, marching in parades, endorsing politicians, boasting millions of followers. Entire towns operate under their gaze. The fear is real, constant and suffocating. Yet in spite of it all, or maybe because of it, black Americans create, build, thrive. You stop by a print shop where a man is publishing poetry. Langston Hughes, Claude McKay, voices rising out of Harlem with clarity and fire. You meet a teacher who's helping women learn to read. A pastor who organises food drives and voter education meetings. A tailor who dreams of opening his own shop downtown, where he probably won't be allowed to rent space. This is the duality of black life in 1925. Joy and danger, excellence and exclusion, resilience and rage. Everything takes more effort. Every win is uphill, but the roots are deep and the branches are growing. You can feel it in the conversations, in the sermons, in the music that spills out of every corner. A generation is rising, educated, ambitious, and no longer willing to accept crumbs. You hop a train heading west and step into a different kind of segregation. In Oklahoma, you visit a once thriving black town. Greenwood, into Tulsa, still trying to rebuild after the horror of 1921. Just 4 years ago, the neighborhood was bombed, burned, and razed to the ground during one of the worst race massacres in American history. Hundreds killed, thousands displaced, and still they rebuild. Brick by brick, store by store, because giving up isn't an option, and as you ride south, the separation sharpens. You enter a train station with 2 waiting rooms, one marked white, the other coloured. Separate water fountains, separate restrooms, everything duplicated, everything degraded. You can't pretend it's just preference or tradition. It's about power. It's about control. Scholars still argue about the impact of segregation in the 1920s. Some frame it as a test of character, how communities found strength under pressure. Others focus on the staggering loss of lives, of potential, of wealth and opportunity systematically stolen. They are both right. There was brilliance and there was brutality. and there's no clean way to separate them. The day ends back in the city, where a boy reads aloud from a poem he wrote in school. It's clumsy, sure, but beautiful in its earnestness. He talks about light, about wanting to be seen, about dreaming of something bigger than a city block. His father claps, his mother wipes a tear, and you realise this isn't a footnote in history, it's the headline. You walk home through dark streets where every porch holds a story, every alley a prayer. And though you're exhausted, mentally, emotionally, you feel something stronger than sadness, a kind of awe, because in this part of 1925, nothing is handed to you, but everything you build is yours. This morning you wake not in a crowded tenement or a brick townhouse, but under an open sky. The air is thinner here, dry and sharp, smelling faintly of dust, wood smoke and sagebrush. You're far from the cities now, off the paved roads, beyond the last train stop. The land stretches endlessly before you, broken only by the occasional squat building, a thin fence, or the silhouette of someone walking across a dry field. This is Indian country, and today, in 1925, you're stepping into a version of America that existed long before America itself, a land claimed, taken, renamed, and still deeply inhabited by its first peoples. You're on a Native American reservation, one of over 100, across the United States. You're here not as a tourist, but to listen, to walk among the people whose history has been rewritten, misquoted, and too often ignored altogether. And the truth is, in 1925, native life is under siege, not just from governments and policies, but from silence. You start your day in a modest wooden schoolhouse built by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA. It sits alone at the edge of a reservation in the southwest, its paint faded by sun and sand. Inside, desks are arranged in rigid rows. A teacher stands at the front, pointing at English words on a blackboard while children stare ahead in silence. Their long braids have been cut short, their traditional names replaced by ones easier to pronounce. There's a sign above the door that says "Speak English." This isn't just education, it's assimilation. For years now, native children have been sent to boarding schools, sometimes hundreds of miles away, often against the will of their parents. The goal? To civilize them, to strip them of their languages, beliefs and culture. Hair is cut, sacred items are confiscated, punishment is swift. One boy mutters a phrase in Lakota to his cousin, and is made to scrub the floors with a brush until his hands bleed. The philosophy behind these schools is summed up chillingly by the words of Captain Richard Henry Pratt, founder of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School: "Kill the Indian and save the man." By 1925, this ideology has shaped the lives of entire generations, and the effects are everywhere. Generational trauma, lost languages, fractured families. Some children never return home at all. You leave the school and step into a home on the reservation, simple, quiet, and filled with things that tell a different story. There are woven baskets, clay pots, ceremonial blankets folded carefully at the foot of a handmade bed. A woman tends a small fire in the hearth while her granddaughter crushes corn using a stone worn smooth by generations of hands. The conversation is sparse but purposeful. English blends with Navajo or Crow or Ojibwe, spoken quietly, privately, like something sacred still clinging to the cracks of everyday life. Meals are simple: fry bread, beans, stew, made from game if you're lucky, government-issued lard and flour if you're not. Much of the traditional food, buffalo, wild rice, fresh fish, has been cut off by land loss or government control. The reservation system has created pockets of isolation and dependence, where native people are expected to live on government rations and minimal infrastructure. The land is often dry, infertile, and strategically chosen to be far from valuable resources, and yet life continues. You attend a ceremony at dusk, far from the eyes of white authorities who might ban it. Many native religious practices, dances, rituals, even songs, have been outlawed under federal law for decades. The government sees them as pagan or savage, a threat to Christianization and control. But here, in the fading light, you see feathers lifted to the sky, smoke curling upward from a small fire, and drums pulsing like a heartbeat from the earth itself. No photos, no programs, just memory. You talk to an elder afterward, his face lined, his hands calloused. He remembers the day his son was taken to boarding school. He remembers the white agent who told him they'd make a man out of him. The boy came back 6 years later with new clothes, a new accent, and eyes that didn't look the CAOT. He couldn't speak to his grandmother anymore. He didn't want to. Despite everything the old man tells you, they are still here. We remember, he says, even if they don't want us to. In the small tribal office down the road, you glance at maps on the wall. One shows the tribe's original territory, vast, sprawling, rich in rivers and hunting trails. Another shows the current reservation, a fraction of the original land boxed in by railroad tracks and ranch fences. This is the legacy of treaties broken, promises ignored, and land stolen. Some of the land was taken by military force. Some was purchased through coercion. Some was just marked off one day on a government map and taken without a word. And yet even within this box, native governments persist. Tribal councils meet. Leaders are elected. Decisions are made. It's autonomy, but only in pieces. The federal government still controls funding, law enforcement, education, and infrastructure. Reservations are sovereign but dependent, a contradiction that defines nearly every aspect of daily life. You hear talk of the Indian Citizenship Act passed just last year in 1924. It granted US citizenship to all Native Americans born in the country. Sounds good on a paper, but there's a catch. Citizenship doesn't guarantee voting rights. States still have the power to block Native people from voting, often through literacy tests, poll taxes, or outright refusal, so the title is hollow. You're a citizen, but not always a participant. A quirky fact catches your attention. During World War I, thousands of Native men volunteered to fight, even though they weren't considered citizens at the time. They served with distinction, often as scouts and code talkers. Their languages, so long suppressed, became weapons of war. But when they came home, no parades, no thanks, just the same fences, the same suspicion, the same loss. By nightfall, the wind has picked up. You sit near the edge of the reservation, looking out at the hills beyond, knowing they were once part of tribal land, before mining companies, railroads, and homesteaders claimed them. A boy nearby shows you his beadwork, each pattern a language older than any textbook. His mother wants him to become a teacher. His grandfather wants him to remember who he is. You leave with a heaviness that's hard to shake. Because in 25, the original stewards of this land are still here, still holding on, but their presence has been reduced to a footnote in most history books, and that footnote is often wrong. Historians argue over how much cultural loss occurred during this era. Some say it was catastrophic, a generational severing. Others point out the resilience, the survival, the quiet rebellion of keeping traditions alive under impossible odds. The truth, of course, is both. You lie down under unfamiliar stars, hearing a coyote cry in the distance. You think about the children in boarding schools, the elders in forgotten corners, the tribes forced to prove their existence to bureaucrats. But you also think about the ceremony, the laughter at dinner, the intricate beadwork passed from hand to hand. What's been taken is vast, but what remains, it refuses to vanish. You wake to the sound of a rooster crowing, not in the cute, kitschy way printed on a coffee mug, but in the very real, very loud, very insistent get up right now and chop something kind of way. You roll out of bed and blink at the wooden beams above you. There's no city outside your window today, no honking cars, no jazz drifting through the alley, no trolley bells, just an open sky, a dirt path, and fields stretching so far you can barely see the fence line. Welcome to rural America in 25, where life moves slower, work starts earlier, and there's a very real chance you're about to milk something before breakfast. You stumble into the kitchen and find the whole house already in motion. A fire's crackling in the stove, heating up biscuits and beans. A woman with her sleeves rolled up is pouring buttermilk into a chipped ceramic bowl. A boy barely 10 is hauling a sloshing bucket in from the barn like it's nothing. These aren't chores, this is just life. The farm doesn't wait, not for weekends, not for holidays, not for anyone's mood. You step outside and are hit with the scent of manure, hay, and earth still damp with dew. It's not unpleasant, just real. You make your way to the barn where cows blink at you with that eternal judgmental cow stare. Chickens cluck and flutter nearby. Someone hands you a pail and points toward a stool. You kneel, awkward, and begin to milk by hand, your fingers already sore after 3 minutes. Meanwhile, a man your age is stacking hay like he's made of muscle and tobacco spit. You feel underqualified. This is small-town agricultural America, and in 25 nearly half the population still lives in rural areas. Cities are growing, sure, but out here the farm is king. Your life is dictated by the seasons. Spring is for planting, summer is for sweating, fall is for harvesting, and winter is for praying. Your firewood stack doesn't run out. You don't have a lot, but you know how to use what you've got. And if you break something, you fix it, or pretend it doesn't exist until it fixes itself. After breakfast on eggs, cornbread, and coffee strong enough to remove paint, you hitch your horse to a wagon and rattle down the dirt road toward the nearest town centre. It's only 3 miles, but it takes half an hour on wheels that sound like they're screaming. Along the way, you pass neighbours, some on horseback, others in buggies, and a few lucky souls in a shiny new Model T kicking up dust like royalty. Cars are creeping into rural life, but the roads aren't ready for them yet. If it rains too hard, you're not going anywhere. The town is a sleepy grid of modest buildings, a feed store, a post office, a small general store, and a one-room church with a bell that's more enthusiastic than precise. The barber doubles as a dentist. The doctor is usually in, but mostly for delivering babies or checking fevers. If something really goes wrong, you'll be driven to the city on a hope and a prayer. You stop by the general store where shelves are stocked with lard, flour, nails, bolts of fabric, licorice sticks, and hard candy in glass jars. Prices are scribbled in chalk. There's a register, but plenty of people pay on credit. Their names written down in a small notebook behind the counter. Everybody's rich. Everyone's surviving. That's the contract out here. You help your neighbours, and they help you. As you leave, you hear a radio crackling from the back office, still rare out here, but growing. Most rural homes still don't have electricity. In fact, in 1925, fewer than 10% of American farms have power. No lights, no outlets, no electric stoves or fans. You're living by daylight and kerosene, and if you want music, you play it yourself. Maybe that's why everyone out here can sing, fiddle, or at least stomp rhythmically. You stop by a schoolhouse where children are outside for recess, playing tag in bare feet. The teacher, a young woman barely out of her teens, teaches every grade in one room. Chalkboard at the front, stove in the corner, desks in neat rows. Inside, kids practice penmanship, recite geography and memorise poems. The basics. No lab equipment, no cafeteria, no gym, but there's learning. And for many families that's a miracle. Still, the rural-urban divide is growing. In cities you can go see jazz, movies, plays. You can order Chinese food or ice cream at midnight. You can call someone on a telephone just to say hi. Out here, the entertainment is church picnics, barn dances and gossip. And yet, there's a sense of peace too. Gates to breathe, to think, to watch a sunset without streetlights getting in the way. You sit down for supper with a local family, 3 generations packed around a wooden table, passing dishes of beans, greens and pork fried in a cast iron pan, so old it could probably testify in court. The conversation is slow, peppered with mm-hms and long pauses. They ask where you're from, and you don't know how to answer, so you say the city. They nod knowingly. Too fast there, too loud, and it's hard to argue with that. But you're also aware that not everyone in rural America lives like this. On another patch of land just a few miles away, you'd find a black sharecropper's cabin, its walls thin, its roof patched with tar paper, the owner still paying rent to the grandson of the man who used to own his family. You'd find native families pushed to the edge of usable land, given tools that barely function, and rules that change every year. Rural life may be simple, but it's not equally hard for everyone. The land doesn't care who you are, but the laws still do. Scholars debate whether rural America in the 20s was idyllic or isolating. Some call it the last breath of true independence, of neighbours helping neighbours, of people in sync with the land. Others point out the lack of opportunity, the educational gaps, the economic vulnerability. They're both right. Out here you can feel free and trapped in the same afternoon. The sun sets over the cornfields, painting everything in gold and shadow. Kids chase fireflies in the yard while the grown-ups smoke pipes on the porch. A breeze carries the scent of soil and wood smoke. It's quiet, really quiet. The kind of quiet that wraps around you, not empty but full. You go to bed early, under a quilt sewn by someone's grandmother, your muscles sore from doing almost nothing. No nightlights, no fan hum, no distant cars, just the faint whisper of crickets and the steady tick of a wind-up clock, and you wonder, not for the first time, what it might be like to stay here, to leave the rush, the noise, the crowds behind, to just live slowly. For now, you just listen, because in D25, rural America isn't behind the times. It's on its own time, and it doesn't care if you catch up. You wake up to a strange hum in the walls, not the natural creak of wood beams or the sleepy whir of a ceiling fan. You won't see one of those for a few decades, but something electric, faint, buzzing, and oddly thrilling. You're back in a house that has the electricity, and in 25, that already sets you apart from most of the country. Today you're going to explore the thrilling, awkward, and sometimes dangerous world of technology in 1925, where cutting edge means a refrigerator the size of a small cow and phones you can't carry farther than the kitchen wall. You wander into the kitchen and pause at what looks like a small metal cabinet humming like it's alive. That's a refrigerator, if you're wealthy enough to own one. In truth, most homes are still using iceboxes, literal wooden cabinets with a giant block of ice shoved in the top and a tray underneath to catch the meltwater. A man delivers ice to your door with tongs and a leather shoulder pad like he's hauling precious cargo. It is precious. Without it, your milk spoils, your meat rots, and dinner gets a lot more canned and pickled. But back to the fridge. The one in this kitchen is a brand new electric model, probably a General Electric monitor top. It cost the equivalent of a few months' wages, and it looks like it could survive an artillery strike. On top, there's a huge round condenser coil that gurgles occasionally like it's thinking about taking over the house. It works, mostly, but it's not common. In fact, fewer than 10% of American households have any kind of refrigerator in 25. Most people still trust cool basements and cellars. You make a cup of coffee on a gas stove, not electric. Electricity isn't standard in every home yet. Cities are wired, sure, but rural America is still lit by kerosene lamps and candles. The Rural Electrification Act won't arrive until 1936, and until then, if you live outside a major city, forget it. You're winding the clock by hand, washing laundry with a crank, and lighting your way to the outhouse with a lantern and a prayer. You head to the living room and see the real crown jewel of modern life, a radio. A sturdy wooden console that looks like it could double as a coffin. You sit down, twist the dial, and hear the familiar hiss of static before landing on a voice delivering the day's news. Loud, clear, and strangely dramatic. There's no background music, no graphics. Just a man talking. Slowly, clearly, like every word is gold. This is the heart of American tech in 25. The radio boom is in full swing. Just 5 years ago, hardly anyone owned one. Now, over 2 million households do. Stations like KDKA in Pittsburgh and WGN in Chicago are broadcasting everything from weather reports to live music, from religious sermons to dramatic readings of Shakespeare. Families gather around the radio like it's the hearth. And in a way it is. It connects people, makes the world feel smaller, brings faraway voices into your parlour. But not everyone can afford one. And even when you have a radio, reception is hit or miss. Antennas stretch across attics like spiderwebs. Some sets require you to wear earphones, like a 1920s gamer headset, while others have a horn-like speaker that makes everyone sound like they're broadcasting from inside a soup can. But even with all that, it's thrilling. You can hear a baseball game being played in another state. You can catch a jazz set from New Orleans. You can fall asleep to a bedtime story read by someone you'll never meet. In another room, someone's typing on a typewriter, the clack of keys echoing like gunshots. No laptops here, just heavy, cast-iron Remingtons and Underwoods with ribbons that need constant replacing. The smell of ink is sharp, metallic. You try to write a letter and realise your fingers aren't nearly strong enough to make a dent on the keys. Typing was a whole body workout. And if you make a mistake, there's no delete key. You either cross it out, start over, or try your luck with a blotchy correction fluid that smells like punishment. Need to make a call? Head to the telephone mounted on the wall like a shrine to distant voices. You pick up the receiver, a clunky black thing with a curled cord, and speak to the operator, who connects your call manually by plugging wires into a giant switchboard. That operator is almost always a woman, sitting in a room filled with ringing bells, blinking lights, and a dozen other operators repeating the same lines all day. Number, please. Connecting you now, lol. If she doesn't like your tone, she might just take her sweet time. Phones aren't in every house either. In fact, if you do have one, it's likely part of a party line, a shared phone circuit with your neighbours. That means if you pick up the phone and someone else is already talking, you wait, or you eavesdrop, or you accidentally start speaking over their conversation and spark a local feud that'll last until 1938. Privacy is optional. You walk past a desk with something that looks like a fancy stapler. It's a mechanical calculator, and it requires more patience than mathematical skill. Pull this lever, rotate that dial, double-check your columns, you use it to tally bills or calculate interest on a loan. Slow, loud, and about as accurate as a weather prediction, but it gets the job done. Barely. You peek outside and spot a delivery boy tossing the daily newspaper onto a porch with uncanny accuracy. Print is still king. The morning paper is how people get their news, their ads, their comics, their sense of the world. You see political cartoons, job listings, and a Dear Abby-style column with advice so blunt it could cause emotional bruising. Most homes also have a Sears Roebuck catalogue, a 3-inch thick monument to consumerism, offering everything from pocket watches to full-blown houses. Literally, you could order a house by mail, and Sears would ship you the parts in crates ready to assemble. It's DIY, on hard mode amour. One quirky development you can't ignore, the electric washing machine. It exists, but it's terrifying. There's a giant agitator in the middle that looks like it might rise up and eat your socks. You feed it water, soap, clothes, and a prayer. It roars to life, shudders violently, and if you're not careful, it can yank in your sleeve like a jealous beast. Clothes still need to be fed through a wringer afterward. A 2-roller clamp that flattens them like roadkill. And if your hand gets caught, well, you'll learn to live with a flattened thumb. Scholars look back at this time and argue, was 1925 a technological boom or just the warm-up act? Electricity, cars, radio, household appliances, it's all starting, but most Americans still live without much of it. The rural-urban tech gap is vast. Access depends on class, race, geography, and luck. For every house with a refrigerator, there is 10 more still cooling butter in the well. For every telephone conversation, there's someone shouting down the road for a neighbour. But what is clear? People are hungry for it. They want the future, even if it's noisy, even if it breaks, even if it comes with wires sticking out of the walls and a manual the size of a novel. The promise of technology in 25 is this, that life might get easier or faster, or at least cleaner. And that's enough to keep people rewiring their houses by candlelight. That night, you sit near the radio and listen to a live orchestra broadcast, the violins trembling through the static. It's imperfect. It buzzes, but it's reaching you. Across cities, states, wires, and dreams, it's reaching you. And you feel, for the first time in days, a little closer to tomorrow. You're back in a suit today. Or maybe a dress with a stiff collar and shoes that pinch after 10 minutes. Either way, you've got your respectable clothes on because you're stepping into the realm of politics in 25 America, where men run everything, women just recently got a say, and the president speaks barely above a whisper, but somehow still manages to shape the nation. The corridors of power don't have marble columns and dramatic speeches today. They smell like ink, cigars, and furniture polish. And half the important decisions are made over lunch at a private club. At the top of it all sits President Calvin Coolidge, the man with the thinnest smile and the thickest silence in modern American history. Silent Cal, they call him, not just because he avoids the press, but because he believes government should talk less and do even less than that. You step into the White House and find him exactly as expected. Stone-faced, impeccably dressed, and somehow both present and completely unreadable. If this were a poker game, he'd own the table, the chips, and your great-grandmother's jewellery. Coolidge became president in 1923 after Warren G. Harding died suddenly, and, if we're being honest, mysteriously, while neck-deep in the Teapot Dome scandal, the worst corruption mess the presidency had seen since Grant's whiskey-fueled cabinet. Harding's administration was full of cronies who sold government oil leases and backroom deals, and the fallout nearly imploded public trust. So when Coolidge took over, his job was clear. Be boring. Be calm. Don't rock the boat. And boy did he deliver. You hear it all day from the people around you. Businessmen in tall hats, politicians in three-piece suits, ladies whispering in corners of drawing rooms. Coolidge is a stabilizer, a minimalist. He believes the best government is the one that governs least. And in 1925, after the chaos of World War I and the social roller coaster of the early 20s, a lot of Americans agree with him. But don't mistake stillness for simplicity. Behind the quiet is a country shifting in powerful ways. You walk through the Capitol and see debates raging, not loudly but fiercely, over prohibition, immigration, tariffs, race relations, and the ever-widening gap between the rich and everyone else. This isn't a sleepy America. It's an America trying to pretend everything's fine while its seams start to twitch. You visit Congress and hear heated discussions about business regulation. or more accurately, how to avoid it. The Republican Party dominates national politics in 1925, and their platform is clear: let businesses boom, cut taxes, slash regulations, trust the market. It's the height of the laissez-faire era and Wall Street loves it. CEOs are getting richer, factories are humming, and middle-class families are just beginning to afford radios, cars and toasters so long as they keep the payments up. Down the street you swing by a women's suffrage club still buzzing even though the 19th Amendment passed 5 years ago. Women can vote now, yes, but the reality is uneven. In many states, black women are blocked at the polls. Native women face confusion about their citizenship status, and even white women, now technically equal at the ballot box, are still shut out of most meaningful political power. There are barely a handful of women in Congress. None in the cabinet, and certainly none at the White House gate. You chat with one of the women, sharp, tired, wearing a brooch shaped like a torch. Getting the vote wasn't the end, she tells you. It was just the start, and they already want us to sit it down again. She's right. Suffragists are splintering into different movements, some pushing for equal rights amendments, others turning to social reform, and a few just trying to hang on to the momentum before it's gone. Then you stop by a local courthouse, where you're told about a new anti-immigration law passed just last year, the Immigration Act of 1924. It slams the door shut on much of Eastern and Southern Europe, sets strict quotas, and bars nearly all Asian immigration entirely. The justification? American identity. The subtext? Racism, nativism, fear of radicals, Catholics, Jews, or anarchists. The same old anxieties dressed in slightly newer suits. You talk to an Irish labourer on his lunch break. He shrugs. I got in before they closed the door, he says. Guess that makes me lucky. Or just early. He lights a cigarette and spits on the sidewalk. But they'll find someone else to blame. Always do. Politics in 925 isn't all polished speeches and patriotic fanfare. It's messy. It's controlled by those who've had control for a long time. White, male, moneyed. And yet, under the surface, you can feel the tremors. Labour unions are growing, activists are getting louder, the NAACP is fighting legal battles in courts across the country, and somewhere a young woman is reading a book about socialism and wondering why her mother still can't open her own bank account. You hear whispers about the Scopes trial, which will rock the country in just a few months. Evolution versus creationism, Bible versus science. It's coming, and when it does, it'll split small towns and Sunday schools like a lightning bolt through a dry forest. People are already arguing about whether schools should teach patriotism or just teach the truth. What that truth is depends entirely on who's talking. Meanwhile, the Ku Klux Klan is making headlines again, not as a fringe hate group, but as a political force. They hold massive rallies, host parades in major cities, and openly endorse candidates. Their platform is anti-black, anti-Catholic, anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic, and horrifyingly popular in some parts of the country. Politicians accept their votes, some even court them. It's one of the darkest and most overlooked realities of 1925 politics. Hate isn't hiding. It's campaigning. You ride a train and find a town council arguing over road funding and school improvements. Local politics, you realise, is where most Americans really live. Federal laws are distant. But whether your town gets a new well or another police officer, that feels immediate. The men in the room make jokes, quote scripture, slap backs. No women in sight. You ask about it. Well, one man says, laughing, they've got their hands full with babies and bake sales. You don't laugh. You end the day back in Washington, sitting on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. The marble is cool under your palms. The city hums behind you. Horns, heels on pavement, the buzz of lights flickering on across the skyline. You look up at Lincoln, cast in stone, and wonder what he'd think of the country in 25. The North won the war, slavery is gone, but segregation remains, voter suppression thrives, and some Americans are still fighting for the right to be fully seen. Scholars still argue whether Coolidge's presidency was a triumph of stability or a missed opportunity. Some say he kept the country calm, others say he ignored the cracks forming under his feet. What's clear is that 1925 politics aren't stagnant, they're simmering, just waiting for someone or something to lift the lid. As the last of the daylight slips behind the Capitol dome, you wonder, is this the calm before the storm? Or just another pause between louder fights? You're not dressed quite right today. Your clothes are too stiff, your shoes too polished, your vocabulary way too modern. Because as soon as you step outside you hear it, a string of phrases that barely sound like English, fired off so fast and cool you wonder if you've stumbled into another language entirely. Welcome to 1925's Trend Circuit, where you're about to learn how to talk like a flapper, act like a chic, and navigate the whirlwind of slang, social shifts, and cultural vibes that are reshaping the way Americans think, talk, and live. You start your day at a diner, well, more like a lunch counter tucked between a barber and a dry goods shop, and you instantly feel out of place. A girl in a short bob, pencil-thin eyebrows, and a drop-waist dress calls the guy behind the counter a hotsy-totsy egg. He winks and flips her a soda without breaking stride. You sit down beside him, trying to decode what you just heard. Turns out that's 1920s for attractive guy, she giggles. New in town, huh? Don't be a wet blanket. So, first rule of the Roaring Twenties. If you sound like your grammar teacher, you're doing it wrong. People in the know are tossing around terms like bee's knees, cat's pyjamas, the real McCoy, and if something is extra great, it's simply the berries. Someone's annoying you? Take a powder. Going out on a date? It's called pitching woo. Your crush? That's your chic or your Sheba. And if the night gets wild, you might end up in a whoopee situation, which is less innocent than it sounds. But slang is just the surface. Underneath, there's a social transformation rippling across the country, and it's loudest among the young. You visit a college campus next. Brick buildings, ivy vines, a quad full of students tossing books and ambition into the air. In the dorms, the boys smoke too much, wear raccoon coats, and idolise Charles Lindbergh before he's even famous. The girls? They cut their hair short, drive their own cars if they can afford it, and roll their stockings down below the knee with scandalous confidence. They're the new generation, born into war and raised on jazz, and they want nothing to do with the Victorian rules their parents lived by. They drink when it's illegal, dance when it's inappropriate, and say what they mean, sometimes in pig Latin, but still. You hear one girl call another a handcuff, translation, a clingy boyfriend. You hear juice joint, giggle water, and snuggle pup. You try to keep up, but it's like slang is evolving by the minute, which honestly, it is. You head out to a beauty parlour, where a woman is getting her hair bobbed by a stylist who looks like he belongs on a Broadway stage. The walls are covered in posters of Clara Bow, Louise Brooks, and other screen sirens, their smoky eyes staring out like they know something you don't. You want the wave? The stylist asks. Marcel or finger? You pick finger. Why not? As he works, you ask about trends. He snorts. Darling, it's not just about looking modern. It's about being modern. In other words, fashion isn't just about fabric. It's a declaration, a rebellion. Hemlines are rising, corsets are dying, and makeup, once associated with loose women, is becoming normal, even desirable. Lipstick, rouge, powder compacts, they're everywhere. Even the mirrors are getting sassier. And then there's the music. Jazz isn't a trend, it's a movement. A language, a full-on cultural takeover. You walk into a speakeasy and feel it immediately. The syncopation, the swing, the sax that practically purrs. The crowd is mixed, black and white, men and women, dancing like tomorrow doesn't matter. And in many ways it doesn't. Because this is now, this is it. The music's not the only thing breaking rules. The dances are loose, energetic, and definitely not ballroom approved. You learn the Charleston, then the black bottom, and you start to sweat just watching. The floor bounces. The walls pulse. This isn't polite society. It's raw, real, and slightly dangerous in all the right ways. The people here know something. Fun is political. Every twist, every shimmy is a rebellion against the weight of the past. Not everyone is thrilled, though. You spend a few hours at a tea room uptown where polite society ladies sit with pinkies out and roll their eyes at the younger generation. One calls flappers degenerates. Another bemoans the loss of real values. You sip your tea and nod, but you've seen the dance floor, and you know the genie's not going back in the bottle. Next, you hit a bookstore and find shelves filled with new names. F. Scott Fitzgerald, Dorothy Parker, Sinclair Lewis, voices that skewer hypocrisy, embrace beauty, and tear apart the idea of the American dream, while sipping cocktails and chain-smoking. Even poetry's getting sharper, snarkier. You flip through the New Yorker, hot off the press, and read a line that feels like a wink and a slap at the same time, and just as you're starting to feel like you belong, you see the gaps. Because while the culture is shifting, it's not shifting for everyone. Black artists lead the Harlem Renaissance, but still face segregated venues. Queer writers and performers exist, thrive even, but in whispers and coded language. And outside the cities, the sunlang stops, the hemlines drop, people cling to the old ways with both hands. Still, the change is coming. A shop clerk plays jazz on a Victrola and calls it race music without irony. A teenager rolls her eyes when her mother tells her not to wear rouge. A teacher smuggles modern poetry into her lesson plan, knowing it'll scandalise the school board. The new America is being born in hair salons, dance halls, dorm rooms and dime stores. Not in parliaments or pulpits. Scholars still debate what the Roaring Twenties were really about. Was it rebellion? Recklessness? A cultural explosion or a moral collapse? The truth is, it depends where you were standing. For some it was freedom, for others, loss. For most it were messy, fast, confusing and completely unforgettable. As the sun dips and the neon lights flicker on, you find yourself back on the sidewalk, walking past groups of kids who shout phrases you don't fully understand and laugh like they've discovered the secret to life. Maybe they have. You pause under a movie theatre marquee, see a poster for a silent comedy, and smile at the tagline "Modern Love for the Modern Girl." You don't need a translation for that one, not anymore. It's dark outside, not the soft, sleepy kind of dark, but the kind that wraps around buildings like a coat, hiding faces in doorways and secrets in the spaces between footsteps. The streetlights glow amber, flickering like they're not quite sure they're supposed to be working. This is nighttime in 1925, and tonight you're slipping into the underbelly of the American dream, the gritty, glamorous, dangerous world of crime, cops and capers, where bootleggers make a fortune. Cops look the other way, and gangsters throw better parties than your average mayor. You start in Chicago. Of course you do. The city is a maze of speakeasies, smoky alleys and backroom deals, all watched over by the smug, cold stare of Al Capone, who hasn't yet reached full infamy, but is well on his way. You've heard the name already on the street, whispered in admiration and fear. People call him Scarface, but never to his face. He runs booze, gambling, nightclubs, and just about anything else worth a dime, and he does it all with cops in his pocket and judges on his payroll. You duck into a club that doesn't look like much from the outside. No sign, no neon, just a bored-looking man with a fedora and a question. You know the password? You pretend you do, mumble something about jazz, and to your surprise he shrugs and lets you in. The inside is all velvet and saxophones. Women in fringe dresses dance on tables, men in tuxedos drink champagne from crystal glasses, and the smell of illegal whiskey hangs in the air like expensive perfume. This is Prohibition America, where alcohol is technically illegal, but easier to find than a clean public restroom. The 18th Amendment was supposed to make the country more sober, more moral, more decent. Instead, it created a thriving black market, a spike in organised crime, and a generation of Americans who suddenly learned to love breaking the law. Every city has its underground watering holes. Every police precinct has at least one officer who knows exactly where the best gin is being poured. But it's not just alcohol. You walk through neighbourhoods where gambling dens hum behind barbershops, where numbers runners take bets on street corners, where brothels operate under the polite cover of ladies' boarding houses. And behind it all, the mob. Not just Italian, though they're the most famous, but Irish, Jewish, Polish, black, and every other group carving out territory in America's growing cities. Crime isn't just an escape route, it's an industry. You ride the L train past warehouses, where crates stamped plumbing supplies are being unloaded a little too carefully. You see cars with secret compartments and false bottoms, trucks painted with bakery logos hauling gallons of hooch. This isn't just petty crime, it's logistics. Bootlegging operations are more organised than the actual government, and often better funded. Rum runs from Canada, whiskey flows down from Detroit, and bathtub gin bubbles in backyards everywhere from Newark to Kansas City. You swing by a police station to see the other side of the law. Their front desk is a joke, more for show than function. You ask about a recent speakeasy raid, and the officer chuckles. Yeah, sure, we raided it. On accident. Then stayed for drinks. You realise quickly that law enforcement in 1925 is less about justice and more about who's paying whom. Some departments are honest, most aren't. You see an evidence locker with 3 bottles in it and hear a detective mutter, should have been 4. Still, some lawmen are trying. You hear stories of Elliot Ness, still a nobody at this point, but ambitious and annoyingly clean. His type isn't popular. Even honest cops hate working with him. Too many rules, too few bribes. But the government's starting to take notice. The FBI is still young, still trying to prove it's not just a bunch of desk jockeys with badges. Soon enough, they'll have their hands full. You visit a courtroom where a bootlegger is on trial. The judge looks bored. The jury looks hungover. The defendant looks like he'll be back on the street before sunset. In most cases, he will be. The justice system isn't designed to handle organised crime. Not yet. The laws are vague, the resources thin, and the corruption so deep that even prosecutors don't always know who they're really working for. Out in the country, it's a different flavour of crime. You hear about moonshiners in the Appalachian Hills, making high-proof corn liquor in stills hidden under brush and covered with camo tarps. These guys aren't Capones, they're poor, independent, and often just trying to make a living. But when the feds come knocking, the result is the same. Gunfire, arrests, or both. You hike up a narrow mountain trail and find a man tending a still. He offers you a taste. You take one sip and feel your eyebrows singe. One quirky detail you notice. Crime is good for fashion. You see gangsters in custom-tailored suits, their girlfriends dripping in furs and diamonds. There's even a popular style of women's coat named the gangster mole look. Boxy, sharp, and a little dangerous. People idolise criminals, not just quietly, but publicly. Magazines run stories about their love lives. Kids trade cards with their mugshots. It's America's weird love affair with the outlaw, and in 25 it's burning hot. You spend a few hours with a former Pinkerton, now working private security for a local businessman who's received threats. He tells you stories about train robbers turned bootleggers, about shootouts in tenement stairwells, about bank heists pulled off in broad daylight with crowds cheering the robbers as they drive away. Folk heroes, he says, lighting a cigar. You steal enough, and people stop seeing you as a thief. They see you as someone who figured it out. Of course, not everyone gets that status. You read about black criminals shot on sight, while white bootleggers post bail and head back to their clubs. Women arrested for prostitution are shamed and paraded, while their clients walk free. Crime, it turns out, is just as segregated and sexist as everything else in 1925. Scholars still argue, was Prohibition worth it? Did it reduce drinking? Technically, yes, temporarily. But it also created an underground empire, corrupted law enforcement, and bred a generation of Americans who didn't just break the law, they toasted to it. By now, it's deep into the night. The music has died down. The speakeasies have shuttered, at least until tomorrow. You pass a man dragging a crate labelled olive oil into a basement, and you know exactly what's in it. Somewhere a car backfires and everyone flinches, because in this town, it might not be a car. You walk past a paperboy sleeping against a lamppost and a drunk couple arguing about whether they paid the cab fare, and you realise this is America's dark side, not hidden, not whispered, just present, built into the bones of the city, written into the soundtrack of the decade. The rules are flexible. The laws are optional. And if you're clever enough, you can carve out a life in the grey zone. Or die trying. The sky is the colour of fresh paper, pale, streaked with gold and hinting at the promise of something not quite visible yet. It's morning in America, 1925, and for once, you're not rushing anywhere. No milk to churn, no nightclub to sneak into, no gangster tailing your cab. Today you're going to look up and out, not back, because for all its contradictions and chaos, America in 1925 is dreaming forward. This is your last stop, what people then believed the future might hold, some of it hopeful, some of it hilariously off base, and some of it uncomfortably familiar. You're at a fairground in a small town wandering through an exhibition called Homes of Tomorrow. The crowd around you gasps at things like built-in vacuum systems and toasters with timers. A salesman gestures toward a miniature model of a home with buttons on the wall that control lights in different rooms. Imagine that, he says proudly. No more walking across the room to flip a switch. The audience ooze like he just revealed teleportation. People believe in progress, almost religiously. You feel it in every invention, every slogan, every breathless newspaper ad promising that science will soon solve all your problems. Disease, soon to be eradicated. Hunger, just a matter of agricultural innovation. Crime, surely technology can keep us safe. War, never again. It's all right there, gleaming on the horizon like the chrome on a brand new Buick. You visit a modern office building and ride up in a smooth mechanical marvel, the elevator. Some still have human operators dressed like train conductors. Others are self-service now, operated by buttons. Tiny, thrilling buttons that give you the illusion of power. At the top floor, there's a man dictating a letter into a machine the size of a suitcase. He calls it a dictaphone, and he swears it's going to replace secretaries. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Not yet, anyway. You peek over his shoulder and see his calendar. 2025. He's doodled a little jetpack next to the date, and that's not unusual. People are already dreaming about flying kite, meals in pill form, and robot maids. Newspapers publish predictions about the year 2000. Houses on Mars, clothes that clean themselves, schools taught entirely by machines. They are half right. Kind of. You still have to fold your laundry, but the internet's going to blow their socks off. Assuming they'd even wear socks in their utopian future. You drop into a barbershop where a radio show's playing, some professor talking about television, this wild idea where images will be transmitted through airwaves, not just sound. People laugh politely. Seems far-fetched. Why would anyone want to stare at a box all day? You suppress the urge to pull out your smartphone and to ruin someone's whole world view. You visit a school where kids are building a miniature rocket out of tinfoil and cardboard. The teacher, a wiry man with chalk on his sleeve, says he believes one day Americans will land on the moon. Half the parents think he's nuts. The other half are just hoping their kid will make it through 8th grade. You crouch beside one of the boys who tells you he wants to be an inventor, or maybe a pilot, or a cowboy astronaut. You nod solemnly. Shoot for the stars, kid. But not everyone's future feels so wide open. You pass a black family loading up a truck headed north. They tell you they're chasing better wages, better schools, and a future where their kids don't have to step off the sidewalk when a white man walks by. Their optimism is brave, fragile, and defiant. You can't shake the feeling that their path forward is twice as steep. You step into a church where a minister is giving a sermon, not just about salvation, but about the future of America. He says cities are growing too fast, that morals are unraveling, that the youth are disrespectful and God is being left behind. They drink, they dance, they challenge their elders. He booms, and they call it progress. The congregation nods solemnly. Change isn't always welcome, especially when it threatens tradition. You realise the future, even in 2025, is already dividing people between those who fear it and those who race toward it. Later you find yourself at a newspaper stand. The headlines are a time capsule. Wall Street hits new high. Coolidge says US economy is sound. Auto sales break records. There's no sign yet of the storm clouds gathering, but you know what's coming. You know about 29, the crash, the Dust Bowl, the New Deal, the war, the next war. You know this age of confidence is about to stumble face first into reality, and yet you don't feel smug, you feel protective of these people with their wide eyes and their Nickelodeons and their first timid steps into electricity. Their faith in science and progress, however naive, is kind of beautiful. They're trying, they're hoping. Even when they get it wrong, especially when they get it wrong, it's rooted in the belief that life can and should get better. You swing by an early aviation show where a man with goggles and a wax moustache climbs into a plane that looks like it was built from coat hangers and newspaper. He taxis down a grass field, lurches into the air, and the crowd cheers like they've seen a miracle. And in a way they have. Humans are flying. It's 1925. Anything seems possible. Back in the city, you pass a row of girls sitting in front of typewriters at secretarial school. One leans over to her friend and whispers, "Think in 20 years we'll still be doing this." Her friend sighs, "Not if my husband has a good job." You smile, not because it's funny, but because you know that by the time their daughters grow up, those machines will be smaller, faster, and run by women who don't need a husband to buy one. Scholars still puzzle over the optimism of the 1920s. Some see it as arrogance before a fall. Others say it was necessary, fuel for the wild invention and cultural energy of the decade. Maybe it's both. Maybe hope is just dangerous enough to change things and blind enough to get you hurt. But without it, nothing gets better, nothing moves forward. You end your day on a rooftop, watching the lights come on across the city, slowly, like stars appearing one at a time. A blimp floats overhead. A radio hums nearby. Someone downstairs is telling a joke that ends in a burst of laughter. The air smells like coal smoke and ambition. And it hits you. This is what 1925 really was. Not a perfect time, not a simple time, but a beginning, a tipping point. The sound of a country catching its breath and stepping with trembling confidence into the unknown. Because for all its flaws, and they are many, America in 1925 believed in the future, and that's something worth remembering. You lie back in the quiet, the weight of the last journey still buzzing gently in your chest. There's no trolley outside your window now, no rumble of Model T tyres, no jazz slipping under the door, just stillness, that soft, velvety stillness that only arrives after a long story has been told and you've finally found your place in it. So much of what you saw was beautiful, so much of it was brutal. That's the contradiction of 1925 America, a country alive with invention, creativity, ambition, and yet hemmed in by injustice, by walls both seen and unseen. You walked its streets, smelled its kitchens, listened to its radios, watched its children grow up in a world so different and so familiar all at once. You danced in its nightclubs and winced in its courtrooms. You heard the dreams, the schemes, the slang and the sirens. And still, through it all, there was a beating heart. Not perfect, not even close, but relentless, hopeful, curious. That's the thing, isn't it? For every moment where the world felt small, there was another where it cracked wide open, through a schoolhouse chalkboard, a saxophone solo, or a headline about some kid trying to fly. The past doesn't live in museums or dusty corners. It lives in people, in questions, in the stories we choose to carry forward. So maybe you don't leave in 25 with all the answers, but you leave knowing something deeper. Life wasn't simpler back then, just different, just beginning, and in many ways, so are we. Now let that thought settle in your chest like a soft, warm weight. Close your eyes. You've time-travelled enough for one night.